moment, one of the guards almost fell and said that it felt like someone was pushing him. After some time, the guys made their way into the dungeon unnoticed and began to thank John. Then the guy replied that they were just getting started. The dungeon in the crystal mine is large, and the red dragon train is very difficult. John also said that the difficulty level has been changed to super high, making it even more dangerous. However, this is the second time they have tried the red dragon, so they will not go where they looked last time. After this, John said that they needed to check these places first, and Sarah agreed with him. Michael also said that there were few signs of demons there, so they could safely go deeper into the dungeon. John clarified that the red dragon had already defeated the demons, so there weren't many of them. And after they saw one of them, the guy realized that there were still a few left. When Michael saw the crystal deer, he became very worried because this demon was very fast. The deer began to quickly approach the boys. At that moment, John decided to fight him himself, which greatly surprised the boy. The guy ordered Sarah and Michael to watch the perimeter. John reasoned that if he defeated the demons alone, he would gain all the experience he needed. He thought it was useful that he had cleared the hidden dungeons of almost high level, because thanks to this, he was able to defeat the deer in one hit. The coordination demon activates the magic power contained within the coordination demon and circulates throughout the body at high speed. Physical abilities are greatly increased compared to the coordination demon. That's why John's level was rising sharply. After the guy finished dealing with the deer, he calmly looked at the guys and asked if they could continue. Michael was amazed at the boy's strength, and firmly replied that, of course, they could continue. He understood that John was just as high-class an adventurer as they were, but this was a whole new level. Sarah, at that moment, thought that he was much stronger than she imagined. At that moment, she shouted that she couldn't wait for the guy to become famous. At this time, the paparazzi asked one of the guys if he was going to challenge the attack in the dungeon. Ryan walked and thought about where these people could have gotten this information. After that, he told them that the dungeon cores and high-difficulty ones must be destroyed as soon as possible. When asked about the guy's job, Ryan replied that he planned to use the free time in his schedule to attack dungeons. It was shown on TV, and Sphere was watching it with Kitty at that moment. The fairy said that the future super high-level adventurer probably received a lot of attention from the press, unlike John. At that moment, Kitty said that in fact her brother and that guy were very similar in some way. The Sphere only said that recently the girl began to speak in a somewhat friendly manner. And then she began to explain that John and Ryan were classmates in the past and played together. Hearing this, the fairy was shocked and began to scream in surprise. The girl began to wonder what would happen if the guy found out that her brother was an adventurer. She realized that Ryan would be surprised. At this time, John and the guys arrived in a safe area of the dungeon where the demons could not reach them. Michael understood that from this moment on, the demons became exceptionally strong. John began to think that the boy was very experienced in dungeons, and it was very surprising that he was able to remember such a route with only one experience. Sarah began to say that the structure of the dungeon was different from the others, and the atmosphere was different. The demons are so powerful that facing two or more at once is quite dangerous. Michael realized that this was where Frank had gone, since it was more likely. Suddenly, the boy shouted out that he had developed a strategy, and Sarah immediately asked about it. Michael's skill was manipulating smoke, and he decided to find Frank and the others that way. It's basically a support skill that causes allies to carry smoke with supporting effects and buffs allies. However, this time the smoke spreads throughout the dungeon. Like a radar, it will cover a large area and detect adventurers. Michael said it took a lot of energy, but luckily John killed all the demons along the way himself. They also suggested that using such skills in a large dungeon might be reckless. However, Michael absolutely had to find Frank, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to save him. As the smoke began to envelop the dungeon, John said that the speed of the smoke was very high, and at this rate, they would quickly find Frank. He also said that the speed depends on how far their clan has been able to advance. Michael continued to search for Frank with all his might, and thought that he was not the type to die in a place like this. The boy remembered asking him if he was going to become a super high-class adventurer. The man answered him that he was not interested in titles and honors. However, if he had this title, then others would begin to bow to him. Frank knew that he would, of course, like all of this for any reason. Michael then asked how the man was going to level up. The man replied that he was going to beat the living daylights out of the other adventurers and show them that he was the best. The kid asked in surprise if the man wanted to become the strongest. Frank pulled back a little and said he wasn't saying he wanted that at all. Frank, kneeling and surrounded by smoke, told Michael that it looked a lot like him. The boy immediately thought that this was the very reason he was rooting for the man behind his back. At that moment, Sarah ran out to him and started shouting at Michael that he was running out of mana. Then John came up to the boy and told him to drink this elixir to restore his energy. Seeing the bottle, Sarah asked in bewilderment where the guy got it from. Then John said that he was showing them this personal remedy for the first time, which amazed the guys even more. Michael awkwardly thanked the guy and asked if he really relied on the boy so much. At this point, John said that they needed to do everything they could to find Frank and the others. Then, with complete confidence, Michael confirmed his words. At that very second, the boy shouted that he had found Frank's squad. After this, Michael pointed in one direction and told everyone to head there. However, their main problem was the demons that appeared along the way. Then John said to leave it to him and added that he would go for the smoke alone. At that moment, Sarah said that the guy was doing a really cool thing. However, Michael, although he thanked her for the offer, still asked to go with him. John at this point said that he did not want to take him, so that he would not be used as bait in case of retreat. Then Michael shouted that he was asking to be taken with them because of his selfishness, and did not want everyone to die. Hearing this, John agreed, but clarified that the boy would not be used as bait in any case. Michael smiled and told the boy that he was very kind, however. After this, he also added that he promises to support the guy and help in everything. Then Michael jumped on John's back, and they prepared to run. In the end, Sarah only said that she hoped that the boys would return from there alive. Preparing to run, John said that they would definitely return. And now they were running, and Michael was amazed at how fast the guy was. Suddenly, they saw a terrifying monster, and realized that it was stronger than any demon they had ever encountered. Michael told John that they could not defeat him, and added that the boy had no choice but to avoid the battle at all costs or run away. Then John told the boy to hold on tighter, and then with confidence in his eyes, he said that he was absolutely serious. Michael confusedly agreed with the guy and grabbed him tighter. John began to reason that the monster was much stronger than the crystal they had just fought. He realized that if he saved his strength, it would drain him. At this point, Michael started screaming that the monster was getting closer and closer. Then John took out his sword and dealt with the beast in one move. The boy began to ask in bewilderment what had just happened and how it all happened so quickly. John simply said that he had simply become much more serious about the operation. Michael was surprised by these words, and the boy realized that the guy never shows his full power. John only said that he only showed 30% of his strength. This surprised the boy even more and made him think. Michael decided to ask if the guy was really exceeding all expectations. At this point, John began to reason that even though he said he wasn't fighting at full strength, he actually couldn't have fought at full strength. And all because if you use all your strength, the recoil will be too strong, and the guy won't be able to move. At that moment, the boys saw that the smoke was clearing and began to examine the area. Suddenly, Michael started shouting that he saw a figure and pointed his finger at it. However, of those who were standing, there was only one, and everyone assumed that it was Frank. Michael realized that the rest of the clan were unconscious, and suggested that they split up and go to help. Hearing this, John agreed, and quickly headed towards the people. Michael immediately ran to Frank and started asking how he was feeling. At that moment, Frank turned to John with all his fury, and began to attack and shout at the boy to be careful. Michael started yelling that now was not the time to fight, but Frank kept yelling that he would kill him. John then realized that Frank had lost his mind and was unable to speak normally. The guy realized that the man had lost his mind, and his magical power had increased significantly. No one could understand what had happened, and Michael sat there unable to even look up. He asked John to step back and not attack Frank. However, the guy said that he had victory over him and was ready for a fight. Then Michael said that he would defeat him himself and looked forward with confidence. John did not listen to the boy and began to attack the enemy from behind. After the attack, the guy immediately began to reason that the man usually faints. But now he has changed a lot. After Frank got to his feet, John realized that his attacks weren't working at all. After this, the man went upstairs and very quickly began to attack the guy, which surprised him. From this blow, Michael flew to the side in horror, screaming at what had happened. John saw that Frank's attack had created a big hole, and realized that he had become stronger. After this, it became obvious that the man's skill was the gravity wave. The guy didn't understand that if they were sucked into this hole, the fight would immediately end, because the chance of escaping from it was minimal. John understood perfectly well and could easily compare this hole to the lair of an antlion. At that moment, Frank landed on the ground and said that he was going to kill the guy. After that, he asked the man if he thought he was a predator. The guy also added that he is ready to fight him head-on and win this fight. Michael at that moment thought that although Frank was one of the best adventurers, John was no slouch either. However, the man's strength was now frankly incredible, which frightened the boy very much. Before the fight, he wished John not to die and to win the duel. As soon as the fight started, Frank immediately flew at the guy. John knew he would be drawn into the attack, and with the man's gravity skills, he wouldn't be able to dodge it. After that, Clenching his fists tighter, the guy prepared for this attack with fury in his eyes. After the blow, Frank got back on his feet and said that this was the kind of fight he had been looking for all his life. What surprised him was that he never thought he would see the guy in full force in battle. And then, with a mad scream, he began to say again that he would kill the guy. John only replied that the man was a fine warrior to have any self-preservation left in such circumstances. And then, also moving towards the enemy, he said that he would deal with him. Michael, watching the fight, was very impressed by the strength of both men. Even from a distance, he could feel the earth shaking. Frank continued to shout that he had never seen such a battle, and did not know that the guy was so strong. Then John asked if the man had returned again. Then the man started shouting that he only cared about winning, and not about what the guy had been saying all this time. Then Michael shouted that now was not the time for such talk, and looked furiously at the man. Then Frank turned to the boy and said that he would do whatever he wanted, and at that moment a scarlet beam pierced him through and through. Seeing all this, the boy froze in shock and did not understand what had happened. John immediately began to think about what kind of magic this was. At that moment, someone's voice was heard saying that the man was very difficult to handle. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a silhouette appeared, saying that he didn't think Frank would be able to break. When John saw him, he immediately realized that it was a demon speaking. The monster then began to say that it was rare for a demon to develop the ability to speak, so he was not surprised that the boy was shocked. At this point, Michael asked why he stabbed Frank in the heart. The demon replied that he had begun to lose control in front of the man, and so it was time to get rid of him. Hearing this, the boy was furious and began to shout that he did not dare do such a thing to a man. He also started apologizing to John for the fact that they came all this way to save him, and it all ended like this. At this point, the demon said that the boy was wasting his time mooing. And after attacking him just like a man, he asked him to be quiet for a bit. As John approached the boy in fear, the demon told him not to worry, because he was not dead yet. Then the boy turned to him and said that he would have to quickly defeat the demon and carry the boy down. The monster merely agreed with these words, but said that it seemed unlikely. John realized that the demon was far superior to him in abilities, but this did not cancel the need to defeat the monster in order to save Michael. It was difficult to surpass the demon mage in strength, and the guy understood this. The monster targeted John, declaring that it would end him quickly. Then John decided to use the magical Eye of Wisdom against him. After the blow, the demon noted that the guy was different from ordinary people. Having prepared a new attack, the monster asked how John would cope with it. Using the Eye of Wisdom, the boy successfully repelled all attacks. He was surprised how the demon automatically applied defense, even when receiving physical blows. The monster attacked again, complaining about interference. John realized that close combat was not the demon's weakness. However, he began to understand his opponent's fighting style. Realizing this, the guy prepared for new attacks. The demon noticed John's special eye and thought about it. Surrounding the guy with attacks, the monster asked how he would cope. The demon claimed that attacks from all sides would make defense impossible. John watched the magical strikes with alarm. As he retreated, the demon declared that man could not be his opponent. John emerged from the smoke, declaring that he had repelled the attack. The monster was shocked that the guy survived. John explained that he neutralized the energy by causing it to cancel each other out. He added that this is just a theory that requires many steps. The demon asked how John managed to do this. The guy replied that he was simply putting theory into practice. The monster asked in bewilderment how a man could do such a thing. In a rage, the demon attacked again, screaming about human weakness. John, confident in his abilities, said that he had seen something similar. With fury in his eyes, he attacked the heavenly demon with his sword. The sword was used without chanting to suppress the demon's power. John decided to put all the magic he could into the blow. The demon's arms were torn off, but he continued to deny defeat. The monster insisted that human magic was too weak. John agreed that most people thought so, but his body is special. It does not consume magic when used. Therefore, he could endlessly pour power into his attacks. The demon, in shock, tried to convince himself that this was impossible. Seeing John's blue magic, the monster realized that he had lost. John received a notification about a level increase. Finally, the guy noted that the demon was stronger, but it wasn't about magic. After defeating the boss, John headed to Michael. The boy received a serious chest wound with severe bleeding. In addition to physical injuries, the magical organ was damaged. John realized that delay could lead to serious consequences. Using magic, he began to connect the torn organs and stop the bleeding. First, I reduced the power of the fireball to stop the bleeding. Then he gave Michael a restoration potion to enhance regeneration. All that remained was to bandage the magical organs. After completing the treatment, John thought that Michael would be okay, but Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. She was amazed how the boy with a fatal wound was healed in an instant. Seeing her, John asked why Sarah was here. The girl replied that she was worried about him, assuming that he had defeated the enemies on the way. The guy, closing his eyes, called her brave in a calm voice. Then he asked to keep an eye on the approaching demons. Sarah hurried off to complete the task, promising that he could rely on her. As John approached Frank, he discovered that he had stopped breathing. Closing his eyes, the guy said that he regretted that he had not killed this man. Looking at the rest of the Red Dragon, he noticed that they were running low on magic. But it wasn't so bad, because the rest would do them good. As John walked forward, Sarah asked where he was going. He replied that he had to destroy the core of the dungeon. When asked about the dungeon boss, the guy calmly said that he had already defeated him. When Sarah pointed out that he had no choice, John asked what she meant. The girl replied that she was looking forward to his future exploits. The guy thought, not understanding, because he had already said that he would not become famous. But it didn't matter, because now they needed to destroy the core. Approaching the core, John did not immediately understand what it was. At that moment, the system informed him of a new item. Deciding to check it later, he first focused on destroying the core. People outside screamed that the dungeon core had been destroyed and the gates were closing. They couldn't believe that the Red Dragon had taken over this dungeon. The appearance of John, who was not a member of the Red Dragon, left everyone baffled. In a calm voice, he said that all the guild members were exhausted and needed treatment. Afterwards, Mike and the others were taken to the hospital and survived. However, the guy was unable to capture the crystal mine, which was his goal. Breaking the rules of the dungeon led to new problems. Sarah thought that they couldn't be blamed, since they saved the guild. She countered that if other adventurers invaded for rescue, it could lead to secondary damage. Sarah noted that boys should sympathize with girls in such situations. She handed the guy the phone and asked him to look at this. Looking at his phone, John saw how shocked everyone was by his action. Sarah added that he was lucky his name was not made public. Asked how he felt, John replied that he didn't care. Suddenly the door opened and a silhouette greeted them, noticing how long it had been since they had seen each other. John and Sarah greeted him back, calling the gentleman by name. The man was glad that they remembered him and expressed a desire to talk. John replied that he was also looking forward to talking. The man thought about how quickly the boy had risen in class. He decided that he would definitely find out what John was really hiding. The guy was thinking that the gentleman needed to be convinced of his mediocrity. However, John was already in the spotlight. He understood that if his abilities were revealed, his reputation would rise even higher. John realized that if this happened, his sister would not be able to live as before. The likelihood that she would be harassed also increased. The man asked how they got into the dungeon, since they weren't on camera. The man insisted that the only way to enter the dungeon was through the gate, and demanded to know how John had managed to do this. The guy replied that he used his friend's skill, which allowed him to become invisible. When the man asked if this friend was an adventurer, John calmly replied that he was not. Since the rules of the dungeon only applied to adventurers, they could escape punishment by claiming that an outsider had helped them. Hearing this, the man asked why they went into the dungeon. Sarah started to tell, and John thought that the girl could easily give them away, but she understood what he was trying to achieve. As a former idol, Sarah has proven to be a skilled liar. After the story, the man stood up from his chair and thanked for his time. John bowed and apologized for breaking the dungeon rules. The man smiled and awkwardly noted that they had a noble goal. As a representative of the guild, he couldn't blame them for their bravery. However, if they break the rules, they will be punished. Sarah replied with a smile that new challenges were good. John also thanked the gentleman with a slight grin. He added that this is all he can do to thank them for their time. As they parted, the man reflected that he had been unable to find evidence of John's strength. But the guy was clearly hiding something and the man was worried about what exactly. Looking out the window, he noted with a smile that John was a new star who had suddenly appeared. He also added that the number of aspiring adventurers who fail will grow. Outside, Sarah, tired, praised the guy for his excellent work. When she picked up her phone, she saw a lot of comments and became upset. John explained that he had mixed feelings about not being able to save one person. Sarah replied that death was the main factor in their work, and he had to come to terms with it. John said he understood this, but was worried about Michael's feelings. The girl looking down agreed with him. Suddenly, she asked the guy to turn to her. When he turned around, the girl began to stroke his head, telling him that he had tried well. John asked her, confused, what she was doing. Sarah remarked that her petting should make him happy. John closed his eyes and agreed that maybe she was right. Sarah waved her hand, saying that she was going home, and the guy offered to give her a ride. The girl replied that as a high-class adventurer, she could get there herself. Later, John returned home and told his sister about this. Kitty greeted her brother with a smile and said that dinner was ready. John smiled and agreed to have dinner. The sphere flew up to the guy and was surprised that he returned safe and sound. She started asking how the task went. John replied that he hadn't checked yet, and they decided to do it now. Seeing that the task was completed, they were glad that the boy was now safe. The sphere began to praise him for successfully completed tasks. Kitty said that there were many happy events today, and she had prepared a sumptuous dinner in honor of her brother. Sphere noticed that she helped prepare all the dishes with her. Kitty urged everyone to hurry so that the food wouldn't get cold. Everyone was already sitting at the table and wishing each other bon appetit. John, looking out the window, thought about the dungeon. He didn't think anyone would be able to invade him since the request was sent specifically to him. This made him wonder who could have done this. John noted that he has enough skill points, but he can't get more magic at the end of the tree. This meant that he would not be able to achieve the skills he had in his past life. Then the sphere said that the boy was able to save his sister, and that was enough. Seeing her, John was surprised, not understanding where she suddenly appeared from. The fairy began to explain that the reason they couldn't progress further in the skill tree was because he hadn't upgraded his skills. Hearing this, John decided to ask again what it meant. The sphere began to say that the legacy he left behind in his past life was too great. In other words, his forbidden servant will be released step by step. John wondered when he first met the faith. It added the ability to exchange items, saying it was an upgrade or something. The guy realized that if there are additional skill points, they can be updated again. Sphere clarified that last time was the first update, and now an item will be needed for the next one. John couldn't understand this system at all. And then the fairy began to say that these problems needed to be told to the guy from the past life. Then, closing his eyes, John began to ask for forgiveness. Because if you think about it, he had set all this up. The sphere said that you can get a rare item in the dungeon. Then John remembered the item he had recently received, and the fairy immediately began telling the boy to give her the item. After seeing it, she was convinced that it was indeed the right item and offered to update it right away. After the update, the sphere started saying that everything was now perfect. At this point, John said that obviously the upgrade couldn't be done with the powers of the sphere alone. Then, turning to him, they began to read together the information that the system gave out. The system was asking for permission to begin liberation tests, which surprised them greatly. The sphere said that it knew nothing about it at all, which left John even more confused. However, the guy understood that this was a very dangerous message. The system was created in his past life, so the guy's feelings were correct. The fairy also began to say that nothing good would come of all this, but John said that he did not think so. He understood perfectly well that they should not choose dangerous paths. However, it was in his blood, just like a magician. John decided that if he chose this path, there was a chance that he could surpass his past life self. Sphere said with only a little awkwardness that she was starting to talk like a guy. And immediately after a positive answer to the system's question, the guy found himself in an incomprehensible place. The sphere began to suggest that this was John's spirit world from a past life. Then, looking closely, the guy realized that it really looked a lot like him. At that moment, out of nowhere, a huge monster flew towards him. Seeing it, the sphere began to say that it knew what it was. Besides the ability upgrade and the forbidden limiter, the liberation trials have another meaning. This demon that has arrived now is the same demon that John followed in his past life. It was a test of the minister's release, like a challenge to the beast. John said he didn't remember the details, but if this was a test, then he had to fight and win. Then the sphere said that, although the monster was still small in stature, one should not lose vigilance. Knowing that he was facing a formidable opponent, John also decided that they could handle it. And so the fight began. The monster rushed to attack, and John deftly dodged. He understood that everything had to be set up by him in his past life, and all this was designed to surpass the abilities of his past life. That's why John had to take on all these feelings himself. The guy finally realized that now the real tests were beginning. While fighting the monster, he realized that the only effective attack was the heavenly demon sword. To use this attack, you need to cast a lot of magic spells, and this is a lot of physical strain on the body. In order to ensure a reliable hit, the boy had to perfectly exploit the holy dragon's weakness. At that moment, the sphere loudly warned John about the approaching monster. As soon as the new attack began, the fairy began to ask what it was. John explained that it was a holy attack, which was one of the monster's signature abilities. The sphere noticed that it was impossible to avoid all the rays, and began to advise the guy not to rush with explanations. John agreed, but added that it was a unique attack that required a special approach. He dodged the first blow, and the sphere praised him for it. Holy Rain has the ability to track magical reactions. That's why John left a magical mark on the ground before dodging. If you do this quickly and repeatedly, you can avoid all the rays of the Holy Rain. In addition, John knew that after each shot, the monster had a small pause, which could be used as a weakness to win. After winning the battle, The sphere happily reported that he had managed to defeat the monster. John noticed that his opponent knew his abilities and capabilities very well. Now John could easily summon this monster in case of danger. After defeating him, the guy immediately decided to return home. At this point, the sphere reported that John had released the skill tree and suggested checking it out. Seeing that the tree had expanded, he was very surprised. He saw new magical abilities he could gain with extra skill points. The sphere asked what good magic he had found. John replied that the test had been very fruitful and that he now had more opportunities. The next day, the guy decided to visit Michael, who still had not regained consciousness. John began to wonder if the boy had really been on the verge of death. At that moment, the man they had spoken to earlier approached him and said that he had been waiting for him. John turned and asked why the gentleman was there. The man said with a smile that he wanted to discuss something and asked to go with him. When John followed him, the man thanked him for his quick agreement. Hearing this, the guy asked what he needed to do. The man explained that they wanted to measure John's abilities as a talentless person. However, this cannot be done with the help of devices, so they want him to have a training battle with a certain person. When they arrived, John asked what this place was. The man explained that this was a special room for heavy loads. John realized that the man wanted to test him, since he had already passed the test for promotion to a high level. After putting all the facts together, John decided that this was probably a test for promotion to the super high class. At that moment, a guy came out to them and apologized for the wait. Seeing him, John became wary, recognizing this man. He was surprised and said mockingly that it was John who had conquered the crystal mine. John replied that it was rude to consider him as an opponent and to meet him after so many years. Simon replied that he was looking forward to it even more. He was glad that his opponent would be John, and he would be able to show seriousness. John noticed that the difference in ability between high and super high class was huge. Simon countered that this was not the case, especially in his case. John thought that he was probably overestimating him, so instead of being serious, he decided to go all out. Simon stated that he was a super high-class adventurer and could not lose. Hearing this, John said with a grin that he knew what he was doing. At this moment, the man was watching the screens carefully. He thought they were just seeing how far John could go against one of the 9 adventurers. He knew it wasn't a given, but he decided the match had to start. Simon thought that if John won, he would immediately be promoted to a super high-class adventurer. So he decided to see how things would develop first. Simon began his attack by asking if John could afford that much. John dodged the attack, thinking it was out of his league. However, he understood that he could handle this fight. After repelling the attack, Simon said that he would then increase his power. John noticed that his opponent still had a lot of strength, which would sooner or later run out. Simon replied that John would win if he acted on instinct. Therefore, when starting a new attack, he suggested moving to close combat. At that moment, John remembered that thanks to the expanded skill tree, he now had a second level of demon ability. This level allows you to analyze and obtain information about visible objects. So John easily analyzed all of Simon's movements and decided to continue in the same spirit. He also realized that if he didn't have the homing effect, then this fire could be avoided. John realized that he had improved his skills since taking the high-level exam. The man watching the screen was amazed, realizing that John was hiding his abilities. He mused that even if they were still in the observation stage, he was still frightened by a strange feeling. Simon thought that a super high-class fighter should be the best, but with John, he didn't feel that at all. He felt uneasy, as if he were dealing with some unimaginable creature. Simon also realized that John was the man who conquered the crystal mine, and the one he once admired. Their fight continued, and their swords clashed side by side. At that moment, it dawned on John. He thought it was the second skill. The guy knew perfectly well that there should be one skill per person. Simon said with a grin that, as expected from John, things would not be easy. The guy never thought he would have to give it his all. Flying to the side, John began to get to his feet. After he stood up, he said that with these two skills, there was no gap between them. Hearing this, Simon only suggested starting a real fight. The guy thought that John's strength was inexplicable, because with only talent he couldn't be that good. That's why Simon decided he would have to wait to find out all the guy's secrets. And then, stretching out his hand for the next attack, he resolutely thought that he only needed victory. After he started the attack, John started seeing things from another world. One of them was once his thing from a past life. John realized that this thing here seemed to be a relic. Simon, taking this item, began to say that he wanted a fair duel and therefore to explain what kind of mythical sword it was. The guy said that this sword, when combined with skills, grows exponentially. After that, Simon also said to make John proud. Until now, only the super high class had used this sword. In other words, these are only those who were the best of the best. After the attack began, John immediately noticed the speed of the guy's movements. The man was still amazed that this now looked like a super high-class fight. He understood that John should be promoted to this class. And all because the sword, which gets heavier with each blow and enhances fire magic, is perfect for him. John reasoned that this sword was as good as the one in the previous world. And he was also angry that all this was causing a lot of trouble. After John dodged the attack, Simon immediately appeared from behind and began to say that he would not let him leave just like that. After these words, the guys were thrown back with all their might. Simon began to say that he had surpassed all his previous enemies. He also added that, no matter how much he wanted to, he would have to show one thing. Hearing this, John realized that he would have to fight seriously. With the magic he gained from upgrading the forbidden limit, he should be able to win. At that moment, Simon noticed a tremor in his hands and did not understand why he was nervous. At that moment, he noticed John rise to his feet and did not understand what had happened. John had absolutely no idea what his opponent was planning. At that moment, all the surveillance cameras in the room suddenly broke, causing the man to panic. He realized that he no longer knew what would happen next. At this point, John began to tell his opponent that he would show him his real punch. However, he doesn't want anyone to know how good he really is. Hearing this, his opponent asked why John did not want this. John explained that he didn't want to become too famous and cause problems for his sister. His opponent took these words with understanding and smiled slightly. But he also added that he believed John thought he had already won. With fury in his eyes, Simon decided to show John his strongest blow. They began to attack each other again, deciding to give it their all. John knew perfectly well that Simon's blow would be strong for anyone, but he was only determined to win, and therefore was ready for anything. And in the blink of an eye, Simon was already lying on the ground, not understanding what had happened. John confidently declared that he had apparently won. Simon asked, confused, why the boy hid such strength. He replied that he didn't want to hide it, he just became stronger. Simon realized that such a John was not his rival at all. At that moment, a man burst into the room and began asking what had happened. He was surprised that the ceiling was broken, because they used building materials with a special coating. John and Simon exchanged glances. Simon nodded to John, showing that he understood what was expected of him. John explained to the man that during their fight, their mutual attacks hit the ceiling, which is why it broke. He also clarified that the damage was mostly caused by Simon's attack and apologized. The man said that everything was fine then and asked what to do with the game. Simon looked down and said it was still unclear. The man thought that if the ceiling was destroyed, the area around the facility might be at risk, and therefore they could not continue. However, he said that they have a reasonable assessment of their abilities, so there will be no problems. He added that he didn't think he and John would fight on equal terms. Simon thought that they had not fought on equal terms, since he had actually lost. At this point, John asked why he was being tested. The man replied that the guild should know the abilities of high-ranking adventurers. He also said that there were doubts about his abilities, so he was given this opportunity. Simon said that, simply put, it was a test to get promoted to the super high class. John merely replied that he suspected it was so. At this point, the man asked why the boy was disappointed, since he had passed the test. He was very happy that the 10th super high class adventurer had appeared. Suddenly, John asked if he could refuse the promotion to this level. He explained that he decided that he had more advantages in remaining a high-class adventurer than being promoted to a super high class. He also said that he doesn't want to stand out too much for personal reasons. The man could not believe these words and looked down. However, the guild couldn't force him to get promoted, and so if he wanted to stay at his level, that would be it. However, according to the guild's internal information, he had many merits, so a super high rank was guaranteed for the guy. John, hearing this, said that until it leaked out, he would not ask for it. Then the man thanked him and asked if the guy was sure of his words. He added that it was a great honor to be promoted to the super high class, and the guy would certainly make history. John only said that he was confident, despite all this, and refused. As Simon left the room, he looked after him and thought that the guy was a very strange person. When they came out, the boy said that it was very much like old John, and his actions had not changed. And then he added with a smile that the guy himself hadn't changed at all. Hearing this, John said that despite this, Simon had changed significantly and had become unattainable. Then the guy replied that John had been able to achieve much greater heights than he had. They were both glad to meet each other again and decided to talk next time. Simon also added that he would not tell anyone about the match, so John should not worry. The boy understood that John was determined not to become famous for the sake of his sister. However, in a world where you need to search or adventure, the guy's strength cannot be hidden. He saved his sister and prevented a life-threatening situation. John understood that in the future, he did not need to be an adventurer. However, he cannot immediately stop being one, because he has become more attached to people than he expected. For their sake, the guy had to continue being an adventurer. Suddenly, a guy came up to John and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, which surprised him. The guy continued to say that he didn't expect to meet John here, and he smiled. Confused, John also replied that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Then a guy named Felix said that John took care of him when he was the Minotaur. Hub said he showed himself to be quite pathetic. John had a bad first impression of them right away, although they turned out to be good people. At that moment, Felix approached him and said that he would make a special effort to teach him to live the smart life of an adventurer. Then John replied that since this guy was here, he would probably agree to this training. At that moment, an announcement began that demons had come out of the gate and that the adventure hotel nearby needed to stop them immediately. Felix immediately said that the announcement came just in time and he should definitely join. Each adventuring party receives a reward for participating in the battle. So it was one of the smartest ways to make money. After all these words, Felix said that they needed to hit the road, since John understood everything. The guy thought that fortunately, the demons were not that strong, and the fight would soon end. When they arrived, Felix also pointed out that they were lucky that there were so many people here. John asked why it was good that there were so many people here. Felix replied that it was easier to kill demons this way, although the number of demons killed by one person also affected the reward. However, he added that the reward for participation is greater than for defeat. Hub said it was a reasonable amount considering the work involved was life-threatening. John thought that adventurers had many different ways, and such conversations could be interesting. At that moment, Felix, looking confidently forward, said that the moment of truth had arrived. The demons appeared and began to run furiously towards the people. Jan started to say that they looked quite cruel and most likely belonged to almost the high class. Felix, hearing this, realized that this time it would be more difficult. The four of them would have to deal with one of them. Telling John that he was very confident in his sword skills and that he couldn't wait to see him in action, Felix entered the fight. John simply said that he would do his best and looked ahead with excitement. The high-class license was originally just a qualification to be summoned to the crystal mines. They cleared the danger zone in a couple of minutes. Jan started saying that they were in danger. At this moment, John helped Felix and deflected the monster's attack. The guy just praised the newcomer and the fight continued. Felix thanked John again for his help and said that he could handle the rest himself. Flying under the monster, Felix decided to discover its weak point. At this point, Jan continued to fan the fire. After finding the weak point, Felix hit it, and Hub started saying that he had succeeded. At that moment they saw that Felix had the demon pinned down, and Ian thought that he should have delayed the shot a little. Then John helped Felix again and asked if everything was okay. After this, Felix said that the guys should keep a closer eye on him and asked Jan to make sure that he was up to his job as a tank. Then Hub said that, in any case, they had killed one of the demons, and now they could simply watch the fight in safety. John, listening to their conversations, thought that since the demons were not very strong, everything should end well. The other adventurers breathed a sigh of relief after a while, as they were almost done fighting. At that moment, a mutant appeared behind them, which scared them very much. Everyone thought that the monsters were gone. But at that very moment, a mutant appeared who decided to ruin everything. Felix, seeing the Diamond Wolf, realized that they would not be able to deal with a high-class demon. Everyone started screaming in fear that it was time for them to run away. John thought that if they ran away now, not only the adventurers would suffer, but ordinary people as well. The guy realized that although his actions would be noticeable, it would be more correct this way. At that moment, a girl appeared out of nowhere and attacked the mutant. Everyone was surprised that her powers surpassed those of a god. Felix, on the contrary, looked with displeasure and said that everything was happening as usual. Hearing this, John asked if the guy knew this girl. He explained that this was the super high-class adventurer Karen. Hearing this, John realized that this was one of those people Simon was. Suddenly, he noticed her looking at him and asked why she was looking at him like that. Then the girl began to move away, which greatly confused the guy, because he could not understand what this meant. The guys at that moment were happy that thanks to the appearance of the mutant, the reward for participation had doubled. It was precisely because the mutant was killed instantly that they were very lucky. John, however, understood that thanks to the forbidden restriction, he no longer had to worry about money. At this point, Felix asked the new guy if he wanted to have a drink with them. John thanked the guys and said that this time he would refuse, because his sister was waiting for him at home. And then the guy also explained that he lives with his younger sister and has to cook dinner for her. Everyone unanimously praised the guy and said that he was a good brother. John, once again thanking the guys, thought that they were, after all, surprisingly good people. Right before entering the apartment, John felt a considerable magical power in the house, comparable to a super high class. Feeling this, the guy realized that she had guests and assumed that it was Simon. Opening the door, his little sister met him and, greeting her brother, said that he had guests. When John asked if it was Simon, the girl replied that it was not. That same Karen appeared in front of him and apologized for disturbing him. John realized that this was the same adventuress they had met. Kitty decided to warn her brother that he had a lot of pretty girlfriends, but this was not a very good idea. John started saying that his sister had gotten it all wrong and he had never met her before. Hearing this, the girl looked at Karen in surprise and asked if it was true. Then the girl apologized and said that she lied because she wanted to talk to the guy. Then the little sister only said that her brother was truly irresistible. After these words, John came closer to his sister and said that he needed to talk to the girl alone, and asked his sister to go into another room. Kitty, dissatisfied, left and slammed the door behind her so loudly that the noise echoed throughout the entire apartment. John began asking Karen how she knew where he lived. He understood perfectly well that guilds do not give out personal information so easily. Then Karen replied that she was curious because he was the only one who dared to confront the Diamond Wolf. So she checked the adventurer database, and seeing that the guy was not weak, she became interested. After her story, John asked again if that was the only reason she came to him. John realized that if he thought about it, there were many suspicious points in his biography. At that moment, without any embarrassment, Karen asked who he really was. John replied that he was simply a high-ranking adventurer. Karen noted that if he had power, then he should set a good example for others. Hearing this, the guy thought that the girl clearly had a heightened sense of justice. However, he decided to simply agree and say that next time he would do the same. After these words, Karen opened the door and once again apologized for disturbing her. When the girl left, Kitty flew up to John and asked what the hell that was. Kitty added that this girl seemed very strange to her. At this moment, John noticed that there was something under the chair and decided to look. His sister got ahead of him and saw that it was a guild card, and realized that she had never seen such a color. John immediately realized that Karen had dropped the card and decided to go and give it to her. When he went outside, he realized that the girl was already far away, and he was surprised how she managed to leave in such a short time. Using his power, the guy moved to Karen and saw that she was in some alley. He approached her and said that she had forgotten her guild card, and asked her not to lose such valuable things again. At that moment, a man came out from around the corner and asked why the guy was bothering people. John then turned to Karen and asked if he had disturbed them, to which she shook her head. The man started shouting and saying that they were going to tie each other up. Then John angrily asked why this had to happen. The man with an irritated voice began to say that he needed to prove his strength in order to advance to the super high class. Karen noticed that there are many selfish adventurers who are overly confident in their abilities. Then the man became even more angry and, taking out his weapon, began to say that they should test his pride. Then John, with a little awkwardness, told the man to calm down. It wasn't worth it. The man began to shout with even greater rage, demanding that the boy get out of the way. John replied that he could not do this because blood was flowing from his head. The man jumped back from the blow and flew past the guy. At that moment, Karen attacked him with all her might. Turning to him, she said with a blank look, "You've been outplayed." There was no emotion on her face as she asked the man if he knew what selfishness was, then added that she advised him to leave. As he ran away, he shouted that he would remember them and take revenge someday. After this, Karen approached John and said that he was clearly not an ordinary person. The girl explained that his evasive maneuver was at too high a level. All his reflexes and kinetic vision were not up to the level he had set himself. Karen noted that this was a glimpse of a skill that could not be acquired by skill alone. John thought about it. The girl seemed to guess about his abilities. She had excellent analytical skills. The guy replied in a calm voice that she was overestimating him. Hearing this, Karen took out her sword and declared that she wanted to fight him. John, standing opposite her, refused. At this moment, the sword was already at the guy's throat, but this did not make him move. The girl asked in surprise why he wasn't moving. Then John apologized and said that everything happened so fast that he couldn't move. As Karen helped him up, she realized she had made a mistake. She reasoned that even if the guy didn't have time to react, he should have at least been upset. The girl understood that his calmness was clearly abnormal. At this point, John started saying that he wasn't as cool as she thought he was. Turning around, he said that he thought they were finished, and it was time for him to go home. Then Karen asked how he managed to catch up with her so quickly. John calmly replied that speed was all he had, and that was how he had reached such a high level. The girl calmly replied that he was clearly not the only one. When their eyes met, she added that she was also very fast. John said he was honored because he didn't think he would be praised by a super high-class adventurer. And then he said he had to go make dinner and apologized. Karen, narrowing her eyes, replied that they would see each other soon. John started to walk away and said goodbye to the girl while she continued to stand in place. The guy didn't realize that they had attracted the attention of an unpleasant character. After some time, he returned home and told his sister about this. The apartment smelled of meat and potatoes, which surprised the guy. At that moment, Kitty came out to him and said that dinner would soon be ready, and that today she would cook instead of her busy brother. John agreed with a smile and thanked his little sister. At that moment, the sphere flew up to the guy and noticed that he looked very happy. The guy replied that his little sister cooks for him, and he can't be unhappy. Then the sphere called him a weakling and said that he stubbornly refused to admit it. At this point, Kitty interrupted their conversation, asking them to hurry up before the food got cold. John noticed that the sphere had already connected to the network. The fairy began to say that recently the number of gates has been rapidly increasing. John realized that this was why the number of demons emerging from the gate had increased. Sphere noticed that the more gates there are, the more places John can train. And that's a good trend. The guy advised his sister not to live near the gate. After all, you never know when you might be attacked. Then the little sister replied that at her age, killing monsters was easy as pie, and smiled. John sternly told the girl not to even think about fighting. With a little sadness, the little girl replied that she understood him, although she was offended by her brother. She insisted that she was actually quite strong. John replied with a smile that, of course, she was not weak because she was his sister. While they were laughing and discussing this, the sphere sat and stared at them. She realized that John seemed to have overlooked one thing, but she immediately thought that it was most likely for the good of his sister. A week after the attack on the crystal mine, John and his friends decided to visit Michael. By this time, he had already come to his senses, and they could talk calmly. When Michael heard about Frank's death, his face darkened with sadness for a moment. However, the boy soon forced himself to smile so as not to show his disappointment. John realized that Michael was not going to blame himself for Frank's death, although if the guy had been a little stronger, he could have protected him. After the appointment, John walked with his little sister and said that he thought Michael would be discharged soon. This made the girl very happy, after which she asked if her brother was going to continue being an adventurer. Then John replied that he couldn't give it up yet, because he needed to strengthen the clan members. Kitty started screaming that her brother had promised her to leave because of the adventurers. Hearing this, John said that they just needed to wait a little, because if the clan members became stronger, he could quietly leave this matter. John also said that having become stronger, he was able to save his beloved sister. Kitty heard all this and said that now everything was clear to her, after which the guy asked not to tell the girls about it. After this, John also said that if she kept quiet, the guy would buy her everything she wanted. At this time, two guys found a gate that was not under the control of the Adventurers Guild. They realized that as long as no one else tried, they could keep all the items for themselves. They talked about how lucky they were and how great their workday had been. The boys reasoned that they couldn't know what might be in the dungeon, but they could say with certainty that they shouldn't try to kill the bosses. Running straight to the gate, they shouted that this was a great gold mine. When they entered the dungeon, they realized that it was of low rank and that they would not earn anything here. The guys decided that it would be better to report this to the guild and receive a reward. When they turned around to go back, a black silhouette appeared behind them. Wandering a little further, it became obvious that something terrible was lurking in this seemingly harmless dungeon. After some time, the girl, looking at her tablet, said that in their days a lot of dungeons appear. All the news was saying that these dungeons were low-ranking dungeons. The girl realized that she could now easily recommend him when registering as an adventurer. At this time, Catherine was in a middle-class dungeon called the Snake Cave. She attacked monsters with arrows laced with paralyzing poison. After another attack, the snake was defeated, and the girl said that fighting with them was even a little boring. At that moment, Jessica shouted at her that she was very good, and then asked her to leave the rest to her. Having trained in magic, Jessica was able to calmly summon a fireball that completely burned the snake. The girls began to support each other and say that they both deserved attention. At that moment, John approached them and said that he didn't expect that the two of them would be able to conquer a mid-level dungeon on their own. Jessica said it was all thanks to the special training from the guy, and now they feel much stronger. Then they moved back and thought that something was wrong in the office. In front of them stood John, to whom the gentleman was addressing himself. The guy sat down and asked him what kind of request awaited him this time. The man handed over an envelope and said that it was a request to search the dungeon. While taking out the papers, he also asked if John could look at these documents. The man also clarified that it was a popular dungeon among adventurers in their day. He began to explain that this difficulty level was slightly below average, but it was originally a low-rank dungeon. John was very surprised and asked what happened, why the rank rose so quickly. to which the man replied that this dungeon was very strange. He said that the more you try, the more you discover, and no one has found the dungeon boss or the core yet. John thought that the dungeon in question was regenerating automatically. And then the man added that the guild couldn't leave the dungeon unattended without being able to indicate the exact level of danger it was at. That's why they would like to ask a high-ranking adventurer to conduct research. When the man said that they would be able to determine the danger level if they found the boss and the core, John asked why they couldn't just destroy them once they found them. The man then began to explain that there were many resources in the dungeon, and so they would like to leave them undamaged if possible. While sipping his tea, John took in all the information and then said that he would fulfill their request. Then the man looked happily at the guy and began to thank him warmly. The man said he would be grateful if the boy could complete the research by the end of this month. As he was leaving, the guy realized that he could have easily refused. However, he knew that he owed some debt to his master. John also realized that compared to his past life, he had become quite soft. Suddenly, Karen appeared next to him and started calling the guy. Seeing her, John panicked and started asking what the girl was doing there. At this time, the people standing nearby saw their dialogue and began to be surprised that they were talking. These looks gave John a rather bad feeling. At this moment, Karen, also looking at the guy, said that she saw him in the guild and decided to chat. Then the people around were even more surprised, because they couldn't believe that the famous adventurer was talking to some unknown guy. Because of these looks, the guy decided to change places with Karen first. He never imagined that there would be anything more complicated than a request for an investigation. Sometime later, they were sitting in the same establishment, and John asked what happened in the end. Then Karen asked if the guy knew about a dungeon called the Enchanted Forest. John replied that he had heard that this dungeon was currently at the peak of popularity. Karen then said that it seemed that none of the information received from the adventurers was true. There were many different demons whose locations were even completely random. After this story, the girl asked the guy if it seemed strange. John replied that it was indeed strange, but the danger level of the dungeon was almost average. Then Karen said that the damage from this dungeon already exceeded this level, which surprised the guy. Of the adventurers who returned from the dungeon, 15 suffered from mental disorders. Katrina noted that 2 months after the discovery of the dungeon, this is a very large number. John then asked if the dungeon could be closed so that no more people would be hurt. Then Catherine said that it was impossible. They still don't know what happened to those who returned to the dungeon. John said that he understood everything, but asked how the girl knew all this information. The girl replied that her father is a researcher and receives information from various sources. After this, Karen revealed that after all she had heard, she would like to ask John for a favor. John immediately thought that he would have to fulfill another request, and asked what was the matter. Then she said that she wanted them to unite and conquer the Enchanted Forest. John closed his eyes, thinking that he knew it. He had been asked to explore this dungeon, so it was obvious. After that, he apologized for having too much to do lately and not being able to create a group. Karen said without further ado that it was sad, but she understood. Then John said he was really sorry and asked if she could suggest the idea to someone else. After that, the girl put the money on the table and said that if nothing worked out, it was time for her to go. As she left, she added that she would leave the money for the tea on the table. Watching the girl, John knew that he would be fine because he was used to fighting alone. However, because of his words, he felt a not very pleasant feeling in his head. In the evening, the guy was already at home and asked his sister if she liked the dinner he had prepared. The girl replied that her brother always cooks better and added that the dinner was very tasty. While washing the dishes, John was pleased to hear that the girl liked it. At this point, Kitty noticed that something was wrong and asked her brother if everything was okay. John replied that something was wrong with his mood, when suddenly a sphere flew towards him. She began to tell Kitty that John had never looked so sad. Then the little sister flew up to her brother and said that she thought the guy looked bad. Then John thanked the girl for taking care of him. Although in reality, he thought that his condition had worsened due to Karen's refusal. He was used to making difficult decisions, but lately, it had not been easy for him. After these words, John got dressed and said that he needed to go for a walk. The guy understood that he simply wanted to protect Karen from danger and therefore went alone. John was determined that if so many people had already died there, he would destroy the core of the dungeon. As he walked, thinking about Karen's consent, he suddenly heard screams. The man called for help from high-ranking adventurers. John calmly walked up to him and asked what was going on. He began to tell that a high-class adventurer was fighting in the dungeon to save people. Hearing this, John realized that the girl had already taken on this dungeon. He calmly said that he would help, since he himself was a high-class adventurer. The man started shouting that John couldn't handle it alone, because the dungeon was truly terrible. He added that the girl, although a super adventurer, only gives them time to escape from the boss. John was shocked that a mid-level dungeon could be so dangerous. The man continued to shout that everything in this dungeon was an illusion. He said it was one of the scariest places, and you could tell from his face how worried he was. After these words, John rushed to the girl and mentally asked her for forgiveness. He thought that he would soon come to her aid, and she only needed to wait a little. Entering the dungeon, John immediately felt a high concentration of magic. He realized that this dungeon couldn't be of average level. He also felt that Karen's magic was becoming weaker. While he was thinking that he needed to hurry, two silhouettes appeared behind him. At that very moment, a monster attacked him, opening its mouth wide. John quickly dealt with the monster, saying that he did not have time to deal with such creatures. After that, he ran again, shouting to Karen that he would come soon. At this time, the girl thought that the enchanted forest was safer than she assumed. But given the number of casualties, the atmosphere was very tense. Suddenly, she heard the cries of adventurers from afar, and heading towards them, hoped to make it in time. The guy sat there, not understanding what kind of monster was in front of him, because he had destroyed 3 of them in one fell swoop. The demon had a dialogue with the guy, explaining that the dungeon was a scary place, and if people came here unprepared, they would regret it. Then, preparing for a new attack, he said that the boy's role in this was over. Suddenly, Karen stepped between the demon and the adventurer, deflecting the attack. Then the monster thoughtfully said that the girl was way ahead of schedule. Karen ordered the guy to take the wounded and run, and she would deal with the monster. The demon, starting a new attack, asked the guy if he was thinking of letting him go. The girl deflected the blow again, thinking that the people were now safe. The demon noted that the girl had good speed and even had a chance to escape from him. Karen remained silent, but in her head she thought that the smart demon would be a problem if she fought alone. However, it didn't matter to her, because if someone was in trouble, she considered it her duty to save them. Karen knew that these actions were her duty, since she had such power. The demon began to say that he felt very sorry for the girl, because today was her last day. Karen didn't understand what he was getting at, because the fight hadn't started yet. And then the demon replied that she had fallen into his trap. The girl confidently said that she didn't think so, and prepared for battle. At the same second, she rushed at the monster with speed, but he easily dodged the attack. Upon landing, Karen realized that something was wrong. She was finding it hard to breathe. Then the demon said that this place was contaminated with magical gas that weakened people. The girl, attacking the monster again, shouted at him not to relax until he defeated her. Smiling, the demon said in a calm voice that it was unfortunate. His body became much stronger thanks to the magic it absorbed from the adventurers. Then, falling to her knees, Karen realized that she alone could not defeat the monster. The girl understood that she should run, but she could not rise from her knees. At that moment, the demon grabbed her head and began to absorb Karen's energy. Absorbing it, the monster said with a grin that now he would have some of her magic. He took away all her strength, and the girl seemed to turn into an empty vessel. At that moment, a bright light caused the demon to be distracted. He looked like a huge flame. The demon turned and began to ask who was standing there. As the fire began to dissipate, everything became immediately obvious. John practically came out of the fire and began to blame himself for being late. After that, the guy raised his hand and confidently told Karen that he would save her. John realized that a hallucinogenic spell had been cast on the entire dungeon, and that the entire space was contaminated with a magical gas that had a relaxing effect. The boy realized that he needed to master magic to destroy the monster. After that, he immediately began to use the power of the Red Lotus Fireball. At this moment, the demon was surprised that the guy could see him, because he himself had never seen anything like this before. A duel ensued between them, and the guy tried to dodge all attacks. Approaching the demon, John attacked it with such force that Karen flew out of the monster's hands. The guy immediately caught the flying girl so that she wouldn't fall to the ground. Laying her down next to a fallen tree, John asked if Karen was okay. The girl replied that she was fine, but she had no strength at all. John then explained that the demon was sucking the magic out of her body, and until it was restored, she would not be able to move. After that, looking at the demon, the guy said that he would take care of the rest, and the girl needed to rest. Then Karen, scared, began to say that the guy could not defeat the demon alone. Then John said that he couldn't leave such a good person like Karen, and he added that he was simply doing his duty as an adventurer and was strong enough to defeat the monster. At that moment, the demon flew up above the ground and, laughing, told the guy that he was talking funny. However, unfortunately, the monster was not strong for this, and asked the adventurers if they knew about the existence of mutants. The demon began to explain that demons rarely mutate and evolve into a new race. The boss added that he had come up with a way to provoke their mutation. The monster stated that it could do this by taking human magic and storing it in their bodies. Pointing at Karen, He said that her magical power had fulfilled the necessary conditions. This frightened the girl greatly, and fear was clearly visible in her eyes. John began to reason that it was now clear that this was all a mutation. Due to Karen's power, the mutation became much more powerful than before. Seeing the monster seemingly being reborn, Karen couldn't believe her eyes. He began to say that he understood perfectly well that he had surpassed what adventurers call the super high class. Then John said that people have always defied common sense. The demon, spinning to attack, only said that he would wait with impatience. At that moment, John realized that the monster was moving very quickly, and he would not be able to keep track of all its movements. The guy dodges the demon's attacks in a matter of seconds. Using all his strength, John also begins to attack the monster. The guy didn't expect to be so amazed by physical strength alone. At this moment, the demon asked what was the matter, because the guy had neither legs nor arms. Then John realized that the demon was very carried away by his power. However, it was precisely because of this that the guy had a chance to match him in strength. With confidence in his eyes, John resolutely invited the demon to play with magic. At this time, the monster walked towards the guy and asked what was the matter, because it seemed to him that John was too scared to talk. The guy, while in the system, reasoned that while the demon was showing off his power, he would spend skills to resist his might. John chose gravity magic, which stops the enemy, but only for a split second. The guy understood that at first glance, magic was not very useful. At this point, the demon said that he was tired of standing around doing nothing, and suggested that the guy listen to screams instead of words. At that moment, John used the null object, which effectively froze time for a split second. The guy began to approach the demon for a new attack. John understood that in an instant, the monster would reduce its strength and counterattack. Watching the fight, Karen couldn't believe her eyes. It was amazing. When John hit the demon, he couldn't understand what happened. The monster was shocked that John was able to touch it and began to attack. The guy continued to strike one after another. Looking at the demon with a haughty look, he said that he was most likely screaming. Rising from his knees, the monster began to say that they would still see who would win in the end. The demon thought that the guy's skills were related to offensive magic, but he could do strange things. He realized that, most likely, the monster had already guessed everything and knew about all his skills. The demon continued to say that he was amazed by the guy's skill in combat, but for him, it was not such a big problem. The monster believed that skill was useless in the face of overwhelming force. John, listening to all this, could not understand when their fight would end. At that moment, the demon, with renewed vigor, began to shout at the guy to try to fight again. Dodging the demon's attack, the boy was surprised that he didn't even flinch. The demon attacked with even greater fury and could not understand what was wrong with the guy. At that moment, John was unable to dodge the blow, and the attack landed right on his arm. Seeing John's condition, Karen looked at him worriedly, but she couldn't even move. The guy understood that the speed and strength of the monster had increased, and now it was difficult to choose the right time. Karen started telling the guy to stop this fight. She begged him with all her might to run away and leave her, to which John replied that the girl should not worry. The guy started to retreat, and then Karen added that the guy was very strong. However, this terrible demon was like a monster that could no longer stop. John began to think that the girl was right, and the difference in strength was huge, but he did not want to leave her. He had 90 skill points left, and he decided to think about how to use them to win. John knew there had to be something that could change the situation. This dungeon creature was very different from the boss he fought. The monster resembled the one the boy had already encountered in the Forbidden Limiter. John decided to take his chance and began to activate the system. By clicking on agree, he found himself in his mind. At that moment, something next to him said that it was glad to meet him, which greatly surprised him. Stepping back a little, John saw a bright silhouette, but he couldn't understand what it was. After some thought, the boy realized that this was the world of the dungeon's mind. The glowing ball began to say that he had a proposal. He asked if John wanted to use the power from his past life again. Then the guy asked in surprise if this ball knew about his past life. Sharik replied that John simply didn't realize it. He also said that the limiter has a deep connection with the dungeon. John finally asked what kind of ball it was. The glowing sphere explained that it was the dungeon itself, and existed to communicate with John. The guy was surprised, because it looked like there was an administrator in the Forbidden Limiter. John was amazed by what was happening around him, but he understood that this entity must be a higher being. The guy couldn't decide whether he should accept the offer that was made to him earlier. However, with the skills from his past life, he could quickly defeat the boss and destroy the dungeon core. Then the sphere began to say that it did not care if the core was destroyed, because it did not interfere with John in such trifles. After that, she decided to explain everything as it is. The sphere said that John would be defeated, and die at the hands of the monster if things continued like this. She also knew that this was a bad idea, so she suggested the following. It is for this battle that she will restore the power from his past life. However, in return, the guy will have to conquer 4 dungeons that will appear in 3 months. John realized that this could be compared to the emergency quests they had gone through before. Then the sphere began to say that it was impossible to compare, since the bosses of all 4 dungeons were called gods. The guy realized that the point was that if he did not fulfill these conditions, he would die anyway. Then the sphere said that this was only a warning, and of course, both parts of the agreement must be fulfilled. Finally, the sphere said that John was very weak now, and asked him to gather strength and try to catch up with his former self at least a little. John realized that this dungeon mind had its own plans, because it explained everything too simply. However, John was more angry than ever at himself for getting into this situation. The boys were stronger than him, and even if he had been able to save Karen, he himself would have died. Despite everything, John was proud of his abilities. He thought that with his current skills, he could defeat any enemy. The upset guy said that he was no longer the shadow of the great magician of loneliness. After this, with confidence in his eyes, the guy said that he gratefully accepted the offer from the sphere. She then said that the 4 gods were terrifyingly strong, and asked if the current John could really win. Then the guy replied that he would gather his strength so as not to lose. After these words, the sphere said goodbye to the reincarnated great magician. John just wondered if the sphere understood what he would turn into. And then he said with a smile that in any case, it wasn't that important. After some time, the demon asked him in shock what was happening. John had clearly changed, the wounds had healed, which greatly surprised the monster. Then the guy said that it wasn't just his appearance that had changed. At this moment, the demon began to shout menacingly that the guy still did not understand the difference in strength. The monster got tired of seeing John's sarcastic face, so he decided to deal with him. At that moment, Karen, closing her eyes, began to shout at the guy that he needed to be careful. As the demon's hand approached John, the monster froze in place and could not understand what was happening. The guy, calmly holding back the monster's blow, asked what happened and why he didn't attack further. The demon asked in bewilderment what all this meant. At that moment, John looked at the demon with fury and used magic to create an explosion. The demon couldn't understand what was happening and had a hard time believing that this was the same person who was here a moment ago. It seemed completely impossible to him. The monster screamed with all his might that he could not lose and tried to resist. Then John said that the demon was really strong, and to be honest, he wouldn't have been able to win before. The guy also noted that this way he would at least make his task easier. The demon began to beg John to let him go while there was still a chance. The guy replied that he was not naive enough to feel sorry for him. Using magic, John began to cast the final spells while the demon hoped that he would not die after the mutation. The monster thought that if it weren't for John, he could rule alongside the people. At this point, John completed his spell and, asking for forgiveness, said that this was the end. The guy realized that he had become a force to be reckoned with, so he decided that he had to regain his former power. After this, John returned to his normal form and began asking Karen if she was okay. The girl replied that everything was fine and asked what it was. She was surprised that the guy possessed such overwhelming power. Karen had never seen anything like this before, so she decided to ask directly. John explained that this power only manifests itself under certain conditions, and that he will no longer have this opportunity. The girl noticed that the guy was just as strong before, if not stronger, and suggested that the guild promote him to a super high class. John then said that he intended to turn down the promotion for certain reasons. Karen closed her eyes and calmly replied that she understood everything. The girl decided that since the guy had explained everything, she wouldn't ask too many questions. After this, John suggested breaking the core of the dungeon and leaving here. The girl began to get up, but suddenly realized that she could not stay on her feet. Then the guy offered to carry her on his back if she wanted. Embarrassed, Karen thanked the guy and agreed to take him up on his offer. While John carried her on his back, the girl thought about how this was the first time someone was helping her. Then Karen asked John why he came. The guy replied that after he declined her invitation, he felt ashamed. Then John decided to go through the dungeon before Karen did. However, it turned out that the girl was ahead of him. This surprised her a little, and then John said that in any case he was glad that he had made it in time. Embarrassed, Karen thanked the guy. John, flushed, said there was nothing to thank him for, and they moved on. At that moment, Karen looked at the guy and asked if she could be his girlfriend. This surprised John greatly, and then Karen asked him if he already had a girlfriend, to which he replied that he did not. Then the girl said that she really wanted to become his girlfriend. The guy said with an awkward look on his face that it was too unexpected, and then he suggested that if she wanted they could be friends, or something like that. John thought to himself that Karen was indeed very strange. When they reached the core of the dungeon, the girl asked if John would release him. She started saying that an item that was rarely obtainable in high-difficulty dungeons was releasing skills. When John asked how Karen knew this, she replied that only a limited number of people knew about it, but the information was available at a super high level. At that moment, John realized that if he became super high class, he would be able to get more information. The boy suggested that perhaps his friend's second skill was obtained through the Grimoire of Liberation. At this point, the guys outside the dungeon were saying that they had a good team. They were glad that even a super high-class adventurer came to support them. As John walked towards the gate, he heard two people talking, saying that a high-class adventurer had already entered the gate. The guy realized that if Karen fought, everyone here would die. At that moment, everything began to shine with a bright light, and people realized that the gates were broken and the core of the dungeon was destroyed. After a while, the silhouette of John appeared through the smoke, carrying Karen on his shoulders. Everyone was shocked that he was carrying a girl on his back. John's friend immediately ran up to them and began to say that he understood the reason for their condition. Then John asked to discuss everything later, as he was very tired and wanted to give the girl a rest. Those around still could not understand who this guy was. John, however, was thinking about how he was once again in the spotlight, but there was no point in worrying about that now, and he decided to just move on. When they arrived, John asked Karen if this was really her house. He was surprised at how nice the house looked. And then the girl explained that her father was a researcher. John asked in surprise if she had heard his thoughts. Karen merely replied that it was clear from his face and turned away. Then she gripped the railing and asked if John really wanted to be just a friend. The guy answered in a confident voice that yes, of course. The embarrassed girl invited him to come in and spend time together. John said that he had a lot of things to do now, and their meeting would have to be postponed, and then asked if she minded. Karen replied with a smile that everything was fine, and they would just meet later. John waved back, saying that they would see each other soon. At that moment, the girl realized that she had smiled, and this surprised her. After some time, John sat on his couch and thought that he had been too self-confident. He believed that if he mastered magic, he would be able to deal with a demon of that level. However, this was a big mistake, and his pride almost destroyed him. The guy realized that he had to return to his previous state. At that moment, a sphere flew up to him and asked why he had come so late, adding that his little sister had already gone to bed. With his eyes burning, John answered the sphere that he had to become stronger. The fairy was surprised and said that she had not heard such words from him for a long time. John replied that he couldn't protect what he had if he remained so weak. That's why he decided to become the strongest again. After that, turning to the sphere, the guy asked if she would help him with this. The fairy happily replied that John had finally come to his senses, hinting that he would, of course, help. The fairy said with enthusiasm that she had been waiting for this for a very long time. Without further hesitation, the sphere once again confirmed that it would help the guy in everything, to which John thanked it. The next day, the boy asked his little sister if she would mind if he became famous. Then Kitty, a little embarrassed, said that she would only be glad of this. While the girl was talking about how she would be able to brag about this to her friends, the sphere clarified that John was the only one who was worried about his little sister. After the girl's answer, the guy thanked her and said that he could now act calmly. However, just in case, the guy decided that it would be better for them to move. Then the little sister jumped up and down happily and said that she was looking forward to her new home. They decided that next time they would decide together what it would look like. Finally, Kitty said that she was already leaving for school and smiled. The sphere then decided that they should get down to business right away. And now, in a moment, John was flying, the atmosphere asking where they were going. The guy replied that in order to become stronger, they needed a base, and so they went to a desert island. The sphere began to ask if it was possible to use it if it did not belong to the guy. John replied that no one would ever know about it, while the sphere was furiously trying to convince that anything was possible. When they were among a bunch of small islands, the guy clarified that he needed to find an island with a minimum difference in altitude. The sphere then suggested one of the islands, to which John replied that it was overgrown with trees, but it seemed that there really weren't such big differences there. They decided to fly there after all and headed straight to the island. When they were already on this island, the sphere asked what they would do now. John said it was very obvious that they would be populating an uninhabited island. The sphere began to ponder where to begin when it comes to pioneers. John said that the first thing they needed was a place to craft the items needed to complete the dungeon. Then the sphere clarified that after this they needed a place to hide from the wind and rain, and suggested building a simple house. John said they would decide all this after they explored the island. There was a lot of flat land on it, but it was overgrown with trees and the area would have to be cleared. At that moment, the sphere shouted to John that it had found a good place. John approached the ferry and was surprised. There was a cave there, and there were no problems building objects for creation here. At that moment he heard some strange sounds and began to listen. Suddenly the sphere screamed that there were a lot of snakes in the cave. They all started attacking John, opening their mouths as wide as they could. Suddenly they stopped and started running away. Then John said that most likely they felt that they were in danger. The guy felt sorry for the snakes, but they would have to make do with this. Now John is left with only the entrance and the interior furnishings. Then he called the lion and ordered him to cut down trees and bring them to the entrance of the cave. Sphere, seeing the lion, said that he no longer looked as regal as he did when they first met. Then John said that they should talk another time, but for now continue to do business. After some time, the sphere handed the items to John and said that all these things belonged to him in a past life. After a hard day's work, John decided to see what his lion had done. Surprisingly, all the thickets were cleared, and the lion did a great job. John praised his beast and said that he was very capable. The guy understood that thanks to him they would soon have an entrance. And so again, after some time, the base was completely ready. And how easy it was amazed the guy. Then the sphere asked what they would do now. John replied that the only way to become stronger was to gain skill points and master magic. Suddenly the sphere's expression changed and the guy noticed it and asked what was wrong with it. The sphere started screaming that the guy had come all the way to the desert island to build a base. If he wanted to level up, then why didn't he just challenge the dungeon in Tokyo? Then John said that they would explore this base to level up. Suddenly the sphere noticed the magic stone, which surprised it greatly. John replied that all these dungeons are not that difficult, and to become stronger, you need to defeat stronger enemies. That's why he used magic stones, which he continued to collect even after his little sister's recovery. At this moment, the demon's voice began to wonder what kind of power was hidden within John. The demon was also glad that he had left his main body as a backup. However, now he will have to start all over again. At that moment, he attacked one of the people as if a regular sheet was flying at the guy. Taking all the energy, the demon said that he would soon become as strong again. He also added that this time he will really rule over everyone. At this time, John continued to talk about how he saved up magic stones even after his sister's recovery. Sphere immediately said with a smile on her face that she understood why the guy needed this place. After that, she suggested that the guy immediately start creating. At first, they decided to use the magic furnace to remove impurities from the magic stone. This way they will get high magical frequency ingots. They will do the same with all the magic stones they have. It takes one magic stone to make one ingot, and overall it doesn't take that long. The outer shell is made of magic stones, and the power plant is made of ingots. The higher the power plant's stats, the better, and the higher the level of magic stones. Sphere was talking about how hard work it was, and how time-consuming it was. And then John said that was why he wanted to give her the job. Then the fairy began to scream that she did not want to work, to which John replied that he thought that she would help him become stronger. Then the sphere said that she didn't think that she would be assigned such a task. In addition, there was no internet on this island, which was very disappointing for the sector. John replied that she was too mired in modern technology. Then the sphere decided that since John had decided to become stronger, then it, as the administrator of the Forbidden Limiter, should make its contribution. The guy also said that he would leave the lion to help the sphere lift the magic stones. At that moment, the fairy immediately became cheerful, realizing that the lion would stay with her. Finally, John said that he would ask her to create bars from medium to super high grade. When the sphere asked what the guy would do during this time, he replied that there were not enough magic stones. That's why he decided to return to the city and collect them. As an adventurer of his level, John could enter mid-level dungeons alone. He wanted to collect enough magic stones, so it would be more convenient for him to go alone than to go through this test with someone else. As he passed the tests, he received more and more mid-level magic stones. John was surprised that he had collected them so quickly, and realized that the adventurers had just escaped. At that moment, the guy was being watched by a worried young man who said that he was in a dangerous situation. The guy didn't understand how John had dealt with a bunch of monsters on his own. He had never seen such super high-class creatures before, and therefore could not understand who John was. The young man began to reason that it was necessary to set a trap. And I also thought that John could ruin everything. The young man decided to escape from the dungeon when he left, when suddenly a voice was heard. Turning around, John was already standing right behind him, asking if he had gathered the demons. The guy said that he felt someone else's presence, and did not expect that there were villains hiding here. In underground conditions, it is possible to commit murder under the guise of an accident, and such crimes are not uncommon. Then the young man said that even though John had found him, he still couldn't catch him. John immediately realized that this was a skill that completely erased presence. This skill was better than his invisibility, But the guy had a trump card for this case. John simply decided to use the wise demon eye. Thanks to him, the guy was very clearly visible, and therefore John could not miss him. After some time, John had already thrown the young man to the ground. The boy couldn't understand how John was able to see him. At this moment, John was only thinking about what to do with the captured villain. After some time, the man thanked John for catching the villain who was responsible for the recent spate of accidents. Then the man added that the other day they helped him with the enchanted forest, and therefore it can be said that John is their hope. Afterwards, he asked if John had conquered the dungeon alone and noted his dedication to the job. Then the man said he had to go and said goodbye. John was thinking at that moment that, given the circumstances, he should accept the promotion. But it wasn't time yet, at least until he found them a new home and ensured his little sister's safety. John closed his eyes and thought that they still had a lot of work to do. However, for now, he decided to go to another dungeon again. After some time, John was already studying the results of clearing the dungeon using the system. With so many dungeon clears, one dungeon a day is not enough. It is better to go to several. John decided that he would do this early tomorrow morning, but for now he returned home to his sister. Kitty, as soon as her brother arrived, began to say that she could not find the sphere. Then John dryly replied that he had left her on a desert island. Suddenly, the sphere jumped out of nowhere and was surprised to see its little sister. This surprised the guy very much, and then the sphere explained that it could appear on the doorstep of his house in an instant. John replied that he didn't expect that and was very impressed with her skills. A couple of hours later, John was thinking about the man giving him a list of 5 problematic dungeons that needed to be dealt with. The first on the list was a high-class dungeon that had no monsters, but seemed to be attacked by demons. This was the most convenient dungeon for John. Before entering this dungeon, he was stopped and told that he could not enter there alone. John then held out his visiting permit and informed the man that he could enter. Then the guards immediately asked for forgiveness, but warned that the dungeon was full of strong opponents. After thanking them, John headed towards the dungeon gates. The guy thought that if there were a lot of strong opponents there, then he really needed to be on his guard. At this time, the security could not understand how the guy got permission to visit the training ground of 100 battles. They couldn't figure out who he was because he wasn't even a super high-class fighter. At this time, John saw in the dungeon the place where the immortal knights were training. At that moment, these knights noticed the guy and became wary. John realized that they had a magic circle with the effect of immortality, which is why they did not die. The guy decided that if he destroyed these magic circles, victory would be his. After the blow, he realized that the magic circle's defense was also impenetrable, and added that he would need the heavenly demon sword. John knew that knights were tough opponents, and this was a tough dungeon indeed. The guy dared to suggest that it was still too difficult for one person. John decided to call upon one of the pact followers who had been freed the previous night. The limiter's skill tree became even wider, and the boy could level up along with the beast. Now the original strategy for this dungeon might have been to avoid fighting the knights and destroy the core. However, John decided that he would not go that route. He ordered the beast to aim at the magic circle on the armor, because they must destroy all the knights. After he saw the beast in action, he immediately realized that he was serious. After that, with confidence in his eyes, John calmly said that it was time for them to begin the attack. This beast was an imperial horned beast, and its power had yet to be revealed. However, he was strong and fast, surpassing even the speed of lightning through multiple evolutions. And so they began to kill the knight one by one, and John praised the beast for his excellent work. The guy understood perfectly well that he also had to become better. At that moment, a knight appeared behind him, but John immediately noticed him and decided to sort things out. Within a couple of seconds, the knight was defeated, and John was standing right above him. He decided that he needed to quickly deal with all the knights. After some time, they, together with the beast, finished off the enemies. In the end, they had 40 mid-rank magic stones, which was a good result. After this, John told the beast that it was time for them to move on. There were still 2 levels to go. And so, after some time, John had only one opponent left. The guy told the beast that he could handle it himself and thanked him for his help. John realized that he had less combat experience than in his previous life. However, he should be able to quickly deal with one enemy on his own. The boy became wary and realized that the knight was, of course, strong. But he understood that this was not even a high rank. That's why John, using magic, said that now it was his turn. In an instant, the knight was struck and split in half. Looking at the next level, the guy realized that there was still one enemy left. At this time, one guy was talking about how a high-ranking adventurer saved a super high-ranking adventurer. Pointing to Karen, he asked if she had been rescued that day. Then the girl, angry, decided to keep silent. The guy kept saying he'd never heard of John and asked how strong he was. Karen replied that he was stronger than this guy at least. Then Sam laughed and said it was quite funny. He understood that the girl fell in love with the guy because he saved her, like some kind of prince. Then he stood up and said that she had nothing to answer him. As she left, she added that if Sam had called her here to ask such questions, then she was leaving. At this point, the guy asked the girl if she would be offended if he tried to kill John. Karen immediately turned to Sam with fury in her eyes and said that then she would kill him first. Then Sam said it was just a joke between friends. After that, he added that they were finished and told Karen to leave. The girl only said goodbye, that if the guy tried to do something to John, she would kill him. Sam, left alone with his thoughts, began to reason that the girl usually did not show such interest in other people. It turned out that he got bored when the dungeons stopped being even slightly challenging. That's why Sam decided he wanted to play with John a little. At this time, John finally completed the last level. It all looked complicated, but the guy wasn't afraid. John was determined to defeat all enemies. At this time, his friend was at another photo shoot. When he went out for some fresh air, Sam started saying that the guy looked great on camera as always. When he saw the guy, he said that he didn't expect to meet him here. Sam said he just wanted to talk about John. The guy didn't really react, saying that now everything was clear to him. John became so famous that Sam began to hunt him. Then the guy said that he was apparently very happy that his friend had become a target. The guy replied that he simply knew better than anyone how strong John was. Hearing this, Sam asked if he meant to say that he was not a threat to him. The guy replied that he would neither confirm nor deny it. Sam really liked this, and this information turned him on. At that moment, the guy said that if Sam suddenly targeted John, he should be more careful. After all, this could seriously hurt Sam's pride. From these words, the balls of the two adventurers collided with each other. At this point, Sam asked the guy if he felt like he was underestimating him. The guy replied that if he was going to fight him, he wouldn't give him a single chance. Then Sam said that he didn't need any trouble yet. He also added that he was just messing with the guy. As he left, Sam said that his interlocutor, as usual, was very strange. The guy was pleased that the information about John was becoming more and more interesting. At that moment, John had the feeling that he was witnessing a change of era, and so the guy finally finished dealing with all the enemies. He had accumulated 100 mid-rank magic stones. John was glad that he could now create a golem. Now all that was left was to destroy the core of the dungeon, which is what he decided to do. The security outside was shocked that the guy had defeated everyone single-handedly and apologized for his rudeness. John just said that everything was fine, and there was no need to worry. At that moment, Sam appeared right in front of John. He immediately began asking who or what he had come to see. Seeing him, John asked in surprise who he was then. Sam then replied that he was a super high-ranking adventurer, which surprised the guards. Because the guard interrupted the conversation, Sam became angry and turned sharply towards him. The security was shocked and did not understand that this was a very dangerous person. John then asked if super high-ranking adventurers were allowed to break the guild rules. Then Sam replied that such adventurers are equal to representatives of the authorities, and while he works, the law does not dictate. Hearing this, John asked what he wanted from him. Sam started saying that he heard the guy was damn good and just wanted to meet him. John looked cautious and asked if Sam really just wanted to get to know each other. Then Sam said with a crazy smile that nothing could really be hidden from the guy. John began to say that people like Sam were not simple and straightforward. He also added that no matter what Sam wanted, he was still very irritable. Hearing this, Sam asked if John would agree to a duel. The guy replied that there was nothing complicated about it, but if he lost, he would stop interfering. Sam agreed to the terms, but clarified that the guy had made a mistake about something. Even if the guy wins, there will still be nothing connecting them. And all because John is destined to die at the hands of Sam. As soon as the attack began, John immediately saw the amazing power of a super high rank. Sam continued to advance on John, yelling at him that he was losing his grip. The guy asked him not to disappoint him even more by wasting time on the fight. Then John said that he was not ready to die yet either. After that, he began a circular activation and went on the attack. Seeing this, Sam, without a drop of fear, simply said that everything was going according to plan. They closed in and began to attack simultaneously, fending off the blows. The difference in strength was obvious, but John did not give up. Sam noted the guy's good skills. He added that, unfortunately, he would have to use his best abilities. After another attack, Sam screamed in rage that something was wrong with John. The guards were horrified to see Master Sam winning using his most powerful skills. John took all the blows with fortitude. Then Sam shouted that if the guy didn't do anything, he would lose. At that moment, John began to attack with his sword. After this attack, Sam was convinced of his suspicions. He absorbed and accumulated magical power, and the gap in power between them became critical. But when it came to managing magical power, John was like a fish in water. By controlling the released magical power, the boy created a trap for the magic that Sam absorbed, thereby damaging him. John didn't understand how he could fight Sam on equal terms. The adventurer himself began to shout at John, asking what he had done. The guy calmly asked what exactly Sam was asking about. Then Sam started saying that his opponent was no match for him, and that he was too weak. He shouted with all his fury for John not to get carried away. He was pleased that the guy didn't disappoint him, but it was time to end the fight. At that moment, Sam began to perform the dance of the endless blade, and many blows flew towards John at once. The guards couldn't believe their eyes. This was inhuman technology. John realized that all these blows had the ability to absorb magic. He realized that it was impossible to create a destructive magical emission for each of these strikes. At that moment, Sam declared that he was sure that the boy would not survive this blow. At that moment, Karen ran up to them and started yelling at Sam what he was doing. The guy started saying that the girl was a little late, and it was too late to do anything. At that moment, John told Karen that he was okay. He also added that it was dangerous, and asked her to stay away and just watch. The girl, although worried, remained where she was. Then Sam said that maybe if they worked together, they could handle it. At this point, John declared that he was tired of listening to Sam's words, and it was time to show the difference in skills. Sam agreed with a grin and returned to the fight. He thought that killing guys like that was the most exciting thing to do. And now he was hanging over John and shouting that he had lost. At that moment, something happened that no one expected. Sam fell to his knees. There was a huge wound gaping in his body, and he didn't understand how it appeared. Then John began to say that in this world there is no such thing as infinity, and therefore any gap can be used for attack. Looking at Sam, he said menacingly that it was all over. The guards were still in shock that John was able to defeat a super high-ranking adventurer. At that moment, Karen ran up to John and started asking if he was okay. She immediately began to use the Starlight Blessing to heal him. John did not elaborate on whether this was restoration magic. Karen explained that she was using the skill to heal him. After healing, John placed his hand on the girl's head and asked for forgiveness for making her worry. Suddenly, they started calling him and he apologized, saying that he had to answer. It was his sister on the other end of the line, asking if he had forgotten his plans for today. John realized that he had completely forgotten about his birthday. He told his sister that he remembered everything and would buy food soon. After this, he told Karen that he urgently needed to leave. The girl, having overheard part of the conversation, asked if he was going to the party. John confirmed, and then Karen asked if she could go with him. A little confused, the guy said he didn't know, and then decided to clarify. In the end, everyone told him that they were not against Karen coming. The girl was happy about this, although she didn't show it. Then John told her to go, and they headed towards the house, leaving the guards alone. The men were perplexed that they just up and left. In the end, they decided to take Sam to the medical center. After some time, he and John reached the house. Kitty greeted them joyfully and at the same time scolded them for being late. John said that he could not forget about such an event, but his sister did not believe him. At this point, Karen apologized for disturbing her. Seeing her, the little sister exclaimed that she was right. This was the same girl who had already visited them. Karen immediately began to apologize, and then Kitty said that her brother would always be happy to look after her. The girl noted that John has a very good little sister. After that, she carefully asked if the guy had any complaints. When they went into the other room, they began introducing Karen to everyone. The girl closed her eyes and bowing slightly said that she was glad to meet him. The girls immediately began to admire her and say that it was a great honor for them to meet her. Jessica even asked permission to shake hands and awkwardly reached out to her. When Karen allowed him to shake her hand, the girl was very happy. At that moment, Karen noticed Michael and asked if he was surprised at the former member of the Red Dragon. After that, she clarified that she knows most of the adventurers and therefore was able to name this information. Jessica said it could be called a phenomenal memory. At this point, Catherine asked if she could ask the girl one question. Having received permission, she asked with a serious look what kind of relationship Karen had with John. The girl started to say that they were more than friends, but John immediately said that there was no point in using words that would cause confusion. Everyone was stunned by this information, and then John began to explain that they were just friends. After that, the guy decided to change the subject and asked where Sarah was now. Kitty said that the girl was unable to come due to urgent matters. After that, they decided to start the fun, and John announced that he had bought some different food. They began to congratulate Mr. Michael on his release from the hospital. At that moment, my sister announced that she was preparing their family's signature beef stew. The girls clapped their hands in surprise. Karen stood a little apart, but she enjoyed the general atmosphere of fun. Suddenly, she called out to John and he turned to face her. She started thanking the guy for bringing her here. John simply said that this was just the beginning of the party and suggested that everyone enjoy themselves. Meanwhile, a super high-class adventurer with the skill of crystallizing magic power was sitting in his office. Suddenly someone came in to see him, and the guy said with a smile that he was glad to see the girl. Sarah chuckled and said they would discuss Sam. When the door closed, the guy added that you could tell from the girl's face that everything went well. Kitty announced that the beef stew was ready. Catherine said she loved the dish, and Jessica confirmed that the beef was excellent. Michael also praised the taste and noted that Kitty was an excellent cook, to which she replied that she tried very hard. Everyone else enjoyed the food too. The guys were discussing how it had been a long time since they had dined with such a large group. At this time, Karen looked at John, and a slight awkwardness was noticeable on her face. This awkwardness soon turned into joy. Karen replied that it was actually a lot of fun. The guys were already getting ready to go home and thanked Karen and John for organizing it. Karen and John also enjoyed it, and while the guests thanked them, they wished everyone a safe journey. Everyone went home, discussing how much fun they had. Everyone was happy and satisfied with the evening. Mike and Catherine were curious about how Karen met John and Kitty. Karen began to tell him that she met him during the raid, and that was when they met. Jessica asked Karen if she thought John was a cool adventurer, to which Karen replied in the affirmative. Karen began to explain that John was much more skilled than the average adventurer, to which Catherine asked which of them was stronger in the end. Karen replied that John was stronger because he saved her, and everyone was surprised. Catherine thought for a moment and asked the boys to wait a bit. After that, looking at Karen, she decided that her thoughts had a place to be. Karen explained that the enemy was very strong. John defeated him, but the guys still doubted Karen's words. But Michael noted that this was quite in John's spirit. Everyone was shocked by what they heard. Jessica was amazed that the guy came to the girls' aid again. Catherine thought that John was only helping them. At that moment, John sneezed, and his sister asked him if he was cold, to which he replied that he was not. The guy thought that he had forgotten something. John and Sphere discussed that they had collected the required amount of high-ranking stones to create 2 golems. Sphere enthusiastically claimed that he could not have done it without their help. While John was thanking his friends, Sphere asked what the difference was between the 2 golems. Sphere asked how the guy managed to create such a high-quality product from such materials. Then John began to explain his method, and the fairy realized that she had no idea about the subject. She said that she would fight against the super high-class adventurers that they created to become stronger. The Sphere asked who the boy would fight first, and John replied that he would fight both at the same time. The fairy looked at the guy in surprise but remained silent. She then objected that there was no point in fighting 2 at once, since they could be killed one by one. John replied that, according to her own rules, they should accept any challenge, no matter how difficult it was. Sphere noted that the recommended level to defeat a super high class is over 1,000, and the guy has no idea how difficult it is to fight 2 at the same time. Frowning, she added that if he was not careful, he would die. John said that he understood her concerns perfectly well, and the Sphere only sighed, realizing that he would not listen to her. He added that it is more efficient to cope with 2 tasks at once than with 1. He also noted that fighting 2 opponents takes less time than fighting 1. The Sphere didn't immediately understand his idea, and then John offered to demonstrate. At this time, Kitty was sleeping peacefully in class. A classmate woke her up and told her that an adventurer had appeared who had defeated a super high class. The girl was very surprised because she had never heard such news. A classmate showed a video of the battle of the best adventurers. Kitty was shocked when she saw the recording. Her brother was there. Holding back her emotions, she called the fight amazing. She added that her brother is like a new star among adventurers. Meanwhile, other adventurers explored the Great Ogre's cave. They discussed tactics for defeating the boss, thinking through every detail. Suddenly, one of them rushed at the monster without listening to the rest of the plan. When the others shouted at him not to run out alone, the boy replied that everything was fine. After striking the boss, he declared that he was not afraid of these monsters. His comrades were shocked by his strength and could not understand where he got so much power from. A girl from their squad admired his strength and expressed her admiration. Everyone was amazed at his skill because he fought hand to hand, even though he had a sword. Suddenly, the warrior turned around and with a sharp movement pierced the girl's leg. Everyone froze in shock, unable to believe what was happening. One of the fighters, clutching his sword tighter, asked the traitor what he was doing. In response, the villain hit him with such force that he fell to his knees. The maddened traitor declared that he needed to find a stronger body. The frightened young man asked what he was talking about. The villain approached him, explaining that he required the body of a talented adventurer. Meanwhile, John activated the golems and prepared for battle. With confidence in his eyes, the young man suggested that the Sphere begin training. The fairy and the lion encouraged John, urging him to show all that he was capable of. Suddenly, one of the golems quickly attacked the young man, which surprised him quite a bit. The sphere was amazed by his strength. If you don't take the fight seriously, you can die in the blink of an eye. Dodging all the blows, John told the sphere that he would die only if the monster hit him accurately. However, the young man knew their pattern of behavior very well. Therefore, all he could do was to predict the golem's actions in order to win. Watching the fight, the sphere could not understand what exactly the guy was planning. Suddenly, John appeared behind the golem and began performing a circular activation. The fairy instantly realized the young man's plan, and this inspired her. John patiently waited for the moment when the monster's armor would become vulnerable to blows. At that moment, he used a meteor bombardment strike, splitting the monster in half. When the system reported a level increase, the young man decided to end the fight. The sphere noted with delight how gracefully John dealt with the monster. At that moment, the second golem picked up the core of the first and began to activate it. The sphere instantly screamed that the golem was turning purple and it was an emergency. The fairy asked if they should stop working, to which John replied that it was impossible. He also added that the golem could not be turned off because it was out of order. The sphere immediately realized that they had no choice but to defeat him. John thought that the monster's power plant had been captured, and now this enemy had speed and strength. The guy also suggested that this golem might have already crossed the super high-class level. John decided to make this fight personal, and prepared for the fight. After this, the object began to shut down, and everything around turned gray. John immediately noticed that the golem's durability had increased significantly. At this point, he decided it was time to use a few tricks. Meanwhile, his sister's school was hosting an endurance race. Kitty overtook her classmates, and there was not a drop of fatigue on her face. One girl asked how she managed to run so fast, since this was the third time she had outrun everyone. Kitty replied that she had a lot of energy and smiled. This greatly surprised the classmate, because she knew that the girl had recently been in the hospital. At that moment, Kitty called the teacher to her. With a surprised face, she asked if the girl would like to join the track and field team, since her results were impressive at the national level. Kitty politely declined, explaining that she wanted to help with the chores. The teacher noted that her time was still impressive and she could win the school championship. Then the girl said that her brother worked hard while she was in the hospital and she wanted to thank him. The teacher admired the girl's kindness. She apologized for her offer and said that she was sure her brother would be pleased. At that moment, a portal opened next to them, and no one could understand what it meant. The teacher started shouting that a gate to the dungeon had appeared, and fear was visible in her eyes. She ordered everyone to return to the school building immediately. The children screamed in horror and ran in different directions. When the teacher saw the demons, she froze, not realizing how serious the situation was. At that moment, one of the girls fell, and a monster appeared right behind her. Seeing this, Kitty rushed to save her, while the teacher screamed in horror that it was dangerous. The girl jumped right on the monster's head and prevented him from attacking. Kitty started shouting at her classmates to run because she would hold them back. The girl ran away, asking for forgiveness for the inconvenience. Standing face to face with the monster, Kitty realized that it was much larger than her. She was scared, but she convinced herself that everything would be okay. She remembered that she had a disease that impaired her skills. This happened because her body couldn't cope with the new abilities. But now she has recovered. Now, she could calmly become an adventurer and activated her sword. Once activated, it instantly cut the monster in half. With this, she greatly surprised the rescued girl and the teacher. Her classmates' eyes glowed with admiration. Kitty said with a smile that she had dealt with the monster, and the system showed that her skill was called Death God. At this time, John was still fighting the golem and realized that it was stronger than him. The guy realized that in order to win, he had to take a risk. Instead of camouflaging himself completely, he concentrated the camouflage on only a small part of his body. If the monster attacks, it will take fatal damage. However, John decided that this was a test of his endurance. The sphere began to say that the guy was acting recklessly again. John replied that this golem's blow was no problem for him. After that, he finished the fight with the monster with a blank look. Sphere couldn't find the words to describe her surprise. She knew that in his past life, John had mastered magic alone and was known as a great sorcerer of solitude. The fairy understood perfectly well what strong emotions had driven him to this extreme. John just enjoyed every fight and everything that happened to him. At that moment, the guy realized that the monster wanted to destroy him and the entire island. The sphere began to scream that John must stop him at any cost because this cannot be done. John merely replied that he would have done it without her command and rushed towards the monster. After defeating the monster, the sphere praised the guy, saying that he was a great guy, and now he and the lion are his protection. John agreed with a smile that this was wonderful. Then the system appeared in front of him, and the guy realized that in this battle, he had raised his level to 150. The sphere asked if he got this level for defeating 2 golems. After reading the information, John realized that he had to learn new magic. Sphere noted that magic is of course good, but how will they level up now? John replied that they had some interesting new magic that would help with this. The fairy became interested in what kind of magic was being discussed and asked to tell her more. John explained that with its help he would be able to travel to the spirit realm, where the souls of powerful demons live. Hearing this, the sphere asked him if he was sure that such a thing existed in this world. John replied that there had been many cases of extrasensory phenomena observed in this world. That's why he's confident he can try at any time. At that moment he received a call, and when he picked up the phone, he realized that it was his sister. A frightened girl on the phone said she was in trouble. She asked if he could come to school now, as it was difficult to explain. John calmly replied that he would be there soon and hung up. Entering the school grounds, he thought that judging by the tone, this was clearly not a relapse of the disease. Seeing the break room, he realized that his sister was most likely there. Entering the office, he saw the teacher, who said that they had been seeing each other a lot lately. The teacher thanked him for taking time out of his busy schedule to visit his sister. John asked what happened to Kitty. The teacher said that a gate to the dungeon appeared on the training ground. This surprised John, but the teacher continued to tell that Kitty defeated the monster single-handedly. The man emphasized that the girl's strength, according to eyewitnesses, was enough to instantly defeat the monster. John looked at his sister seriously and asked her about what happened. He knew perfectly well that she had no skills. John thought that full recovery from the disease meant her adaptation. The sister began to apologize to John for not telling him about this earlier. John also noted that the girl used her power to protect the students from demons. Kitty was glad that her brother was proud of her and thanked him. John asked if the gate that had appeared posed a danger. The man replied that the dungeon was only of an average level. John was surprised, and the man added that, although it was not obvious, he himself was a former adventurer. However, the man immediately said that it didn't matter. He continued to say that the girl's abilities were greater than those of an ordinary adventurer. He was surprised that the girl passed the exam and said that he did not think it was right to force her to take it again. Kitty exclaimed that she could handle it and wanted to become an adventurer to help others. She added that she doesn't want to be left out when all her friends are adventurers. John put his hand on his face and took a slow breath. He realized he had no choice and agreed to allow his sister to participate. He said that he would be her partner in the exam to obtain the title. Kitty was surprised, not imagining that she would be fighting with her brother. There was fear in her eyes, and John didn't understand why she was afraid. He began to explain that fighting adventurers like Frank was dangerous. After some time, they decided to proceed and go to the place where the rank exam was being held. And now John was standing opposite his sister and confidently saying that it was time to start the exam. John explained to Kitty that if she wanted to become a real adventurer, she needed to fully develop her abilities. He also stressed that one would have to fight for the title of adventurer. In the observer room, they were discussing that Kitty possessed the demon god skill, which no one had seen before. They noted that rarely does anyone have such abilities, and the girl is John's sister. The man with glasses said that he had high hopes for Kitty. John told his sister to start when she was ready. After these words, Kitty loudly announced her readiness and activated the power of demons. In a matter of seconds, the girl was next to her brother, which greatly surprised him. When Kitty began her attack, John realized that her power was much greater than he had imagined. Their fight lasted for some time, and in the end, John told his sister that she was able to dodge his serious blow. Kitty, upset, replied that she had asked her brother to take it easy. The observer was shocked by how the girl revealed her abilities. John noted with a smile that he had forgotten how strong his sister was. He wondered whether he should talk about her greatest fear. After a moment's hesitation, John told Kitty that they would now find out her limit. After a while, the girl screamed that she was at her limit, and it was clear from her face how hard the fight was. John knew he couldn't let things end this way. Kitty, with a tired face, said that she would give it her all and not give up. John was surprised that she still had strength. He shouted at her to give it her all, and the space around them turned red. The girl used the devil sword, and a stream of magic rushed towards John. Having repelled the attack, the guy noted that her technique was excellent. Seeing John dodge it easily, Kitty said in surprise that it was amazing. Then John replied that he could say the same about his sister. He couldn't believe that the girl had just awakened her abilities. Kitty, coming to her senses, said that she very much hoped that she had lived up to her brother's expectations. Then John, holding Kitty, told her to regain her strength, since the exam was now over. The girl looked at her brother with a smile and thanked him. At that moment, a man appeared and began clapping, thanking both of them for their work. He also added that the girl's abilities surprised him, and John agreed that he was surprised too. The man said that he decided to contact the guild to consider Kitty's rank. Since the girl had not yet achieved any achievements as an adventurer, it was difficult for the man to make a decision on his own. Hearing this, John asked his sister if she minded, and the girl replied that she agreed and just wanted to go home to rest. Hearing this, the boy told the man that Kitty's answer was positive and they would go on vacation. The man thanked Kitty again for her efforts, which embarrassed the girl. As they began to leave, the man noted that with her awakening abilities and low status, her abilities were impressive. He couldn't wait to see how his duet with John developed. When they got home, his sister started saying she was tired, and John agreed that fighting was tiring. After that, the guy said that he would do the housework himself and let his sister rest. At this time, the sphere appeared and began to ask what tasks they needed to complete. John began to talk about Kitty's awakening abilities, to which the fairy replied that she had known about it for a long time. She added that she didn't say anything about it because she was interested in seeing his reaction. Sphere also noted that the girl can now help John, and that's great. The fairy suggested using a skill measuring device to test Kitty's abilities. John thought for a moment and agreed that he was interested in measuring the girl's abilities. Approaching the device, they decided to find out what skills their little sister had. After the measurement, Kitty couldn't contain her joy. The device showed a super high rank, which was incredibly wonderful. John explained that this was quite natural, since her abilities were just beginning to unfold. The sphere suggested that now that Kitty had settled in, she would be able to seek out adventures of the highest level. John thought that with such potential, his sister would hardly give up the path of an adventurer. With diligent training, she can become a skilled fighter, capable of defeating any formidable opponent. Meanwhile, the monster was happy that he had finally acquired the body of a high-ranking adventurer. His natural strength was gradually restored, and he could now develop his existing skills. He thought that he could become even more powerful than before and rule the whole world. At this time, a group of guys were torturing the poor dog by throwing stones at it. They laughed as they watched the dog try to escape, amazed at his resilience. A monster in the body of a high-ranking adventurer witnessed this scene. He immediately thought that the laws of the strongest also apply in human society. The monster then said that he was just about to test the strength of the body he was in. With a mad smile, the demon began to say that he would show the boys how weak they were. When the guys saw the demon, they couldn't figure out who it was. The demon in the boy's body began to say that he thought he would enjoy spending time the same way they did. The guys just laughed and didn't take his words seriously. At that moment, the demon approached one of them and said that he wanted to try. In a matter of seconds, he slammed the guy into the wall with all his might. Seeing this, the others started running, shouting that they did not understand who it was. Then the demon brought them back, and one of them began to beg for mercy. The guys began to ask for forgiveness, assuring that they would not do it again. But the demon, stretching out his hand to them, declared that their words were meaningless. They had done nothing wrong. The look on one of the guys' faces became completely blank. The demon dealt with them, leaving no trace of them. Having acquired new skills, he was surprised at how interesting they turned out to be. Squatting down to pet the dog, he said that even the least intelligent creatures are capable of feeling gratitude. Standing up, he added that he had healed her wounds and left. The dog felt protected and decided to follow the stranger. The demon thought it was a great idea to swear allegiance to him as the future ruler of the world. Looking at the city at night, he invited the dog to go with him. At this time, Kitty asked her brother if she could take a day off from school and go to the dungeon. John explained that she had to attend school as a senior. He clarified that one can only go down into the dungeon on weekends. While the girl was eating, John added that her rank was still unknown, so she would not be able to go into the dungeon. Looking at his watch, John noted that his sister seemed to be late. Realizing this, Kitty ran out the door, shouting that she was leaving. The sphere flew up to John and noticed that he was being overprotective of his sister. John replied that Kitty had more important things to do than train in the dungeon. Besides, he must be strong enough to protect her. After these words, John stood up from the table and told the sphere that he had finished his meal. After some time, John began to train his invisibility and soon achieved success. The sphere was delighted to see that the boy had become translucent and realized that he was a spirit. John asked how the fairy saw his spirit, to which the sphere replied that he was special. Then the sphere asked how he would get into the spirit world. John was surprised that the fairy did not know this, and said that she was mistaken in thinking that their knowledge was equal. He began to explain that the spirit world was between heaven and the world of the living, and if he could get there, everything would be fine. Sphere asked again if she had understood correctly that he was on the border of two worlds. John confirmed this, and suddenly a powerful magical reaction occurred. Right in front of them, the gates to the spirit world opened, which surprised the guy very much. When he entered inside, he immediately thought that the souls of many demons lived here. John wondered if this could be considered a dungeon if they were behind a gate. The sphere replied that there was no dungeon core here. Hearing this, John asked how to know if it was here, to which the sphere confidently replied that it knew what it was talking about. The guy only noticed that earlier the sphere had said that it didn't know everything. The fairy began to take offense, but John added that she always helps him when needed. To himself, he noted that the sphere was quite simple. At that moment, the fairy pointed to an interesting place and said that there were many unusual things there. A demon's soul hovered in front of the tombstone. The sphere noticed that the strength of demons probably depended on the size of their soul. John said that this meant that the demon spirits would not surround them, and the fight would be one-on-one. Sphere added that for John, who wants to defeat a strong enemy, this is a big plus. In the end, they decided to first test their powers by touching one of the great souls. A reaper appeared in front of them, and John immediately realized that it was a spirit. Looking at the monster again, the guy was glad that the fight would be worthy. With a confident look and a calm voice, he declared that this spirit was finished. Watching this, the sphere thought that John was becoming stronger at an incredible speed. She decided that perhaps he would soon surpass his past self. Having finished with the monster, the guy said that next time he would choose a bigger soul. The sphere began to incite John to defeat all the super high-ranked demons and increase his level. At this time, the adventurer, coming out of the shower, noticed that she had received a message. Taking the phone in her hands, she realized that it was an order to assemble. The first thing the girl thought was that perhaps a super high-class dungeon had appeared. After some time, the counting of the adventurers who had arrived began, and the result surprised the man. He began to thank everyone for responding to such an urgent call. One of them said it was no problem because he had just finished training. Another countered that serious responsibility should not be expected from high-class competitors, noting the absence of others. They began to discuss that those who were not performing their duties should be demoted. The youngest adventurer sat and said that she just wanted to get home as soon as possible. One of the men suggested that she leave if she did not consider herself worthy of her rank. At this point, the leader who had gathered them asked them to get down to business immediately. He reported that he had managed to determine the location of a super high-ranking dungeon in advance. He also noted that the method of accumulating magical power this time is unprecedented. One of the adventurers suggested that the dungeon boss was much stronger than the Moon Leopard Eclipse. He thought to himself that initially only 2 people could have handled this, but other adventurers helped them win. The leader began to say that if such a monster were released, it would cause enormous damage. He asked if those present would help him defeat him. When asked about the location, the man replied that it was the Sea of Trees. At this time, John found a new big soul and began to pull his hand towards it. He immediately thought that he would have enough opponents. A formidable enemy appeared right in front of him, and John realized that he had not wasted his skill points in vain. With a small grin, he decided to begin the fight. At that moment, a sphere flew up to him and said that the enemy looked very strong. She added that there was no point in saying stupid things, because her strength was not measured by the level of the monster. John replied that now was not the time for talking, as the fight had already begun. He began to dodge the monster's first attacks. John immediately realized that the monster could kill him with one blow. He also noted that the monster moves freely in the shadows, making its actions predictable. Suddenly, a storm of darkness appeared out of nowhere, leaving John stumped. He realized that the monster had created conditions in his favor. John said with confidence that he would have to give it his all. John explained that the monster combines cyclical activity and cruelty to further enhance its physical abilities. It is obvious that in the dark he moves with greater speed, outpacing any attack. Suddenly, several shadows appeared in front of him, and John was surprised, not knowing that the monster was capable of such a thing. He began using the technique of flickering light to illuminate everything around him. At this time, John's friend stopped the adventurer and asked her to step aside. When the girl asked what happened, the guy replied that it was about the next boss. Hearing this, she confidently said that it didn't matter, because she would just complete her mission. Then the boy said that the Moon Leopard was an opponent that the 2 of them could defeat. After that, he asked her if she thought John could defeat him on his own. The girl answered without hesitation that she could, and there was confidence in her voice. The guy asked again if she was really confident in John's powers. Having received an affirmative answer, he agreed with her opinion with a smile. Meanwhile, John, fighting the monster, said that he did not intend to lose. After the victory, the system showed his new achievements, and John noted that this was a strong opponent. Because of him, he was unable to level up as quickly as he had hoped. At that moment, the fairy said that with such battles, one could raise the same number of levels. John agreed, adding that it was a great place to hunt without competition, and with high-ranking demons. The fairy wondered how many more people could compete with him. She exclaimed that John was getting stronger at an amazing rate. She was sure that he was no longer the same John that could be defeated by a super high-class adventurer. Then John said that his strength was now incomparably greater than before. Hearing this, the fairy decided not to relax and said that the current John is still far from the same as he was in his past life. At this time, one of the adventurers became upset, realizing that his technique was not refined enough. At that moment, John's friend came up to him and said that he needed to talk to him. The man turned around and asked what happened. The boy then explained that he wanted to ask a high-ranking adventurer to join him on a dungeon raid. Hearing this, the man replied that if he went with them, he would simply die. Then the guy objected that this is usually how it happens, but John is stronger than him. These words greatly surprised the man. He did not know how to react. The guy continued by saying that John could get a super high rank. However, he voluntarily remained on high. The man admitted that he found it hard to believe and simply asked for his name. The guy replied that he was sure that the Adventurers Guild would confirm John's abilities. The man grinned and said he wanted to see John's strength for himself. At this time, the guy returned home, where his sister met him. She reported that she had received notification of her rank. John was surprised that it came so quickly. At this point, the sphere invited Kitty to test its strength. When the girl opened the letter, she found out that she was of the same rank as John. The girl was delighted by this news, and John calmly continued drinking his drink. The sphere noticed that the guy looked happy and flew closer. Hearing this, he replied that he was glad, but was afraid that his little sister might be in danger. Kitty reassured him, saying that she would not do anything dangerous and asked him not to worry. Sphere thought John's words sounded like a challenge. Kitty confirmed that she would be extremely careful. Then John, with a smile on his face, said that he believed these words. At this time, the adventurer felt the guy's magical power and thought that he was facing an unusual person. He knocked on the door, John opened it, and the man asked if he had come to the right place. The guy answered and he said that his friend told him about him. The man continued that he had been told that John was no worse than a super high-class adventurer. John then asked if the man was a super high-class adventurer. He answered in the affirmative and added that strong partners were needed for a trip to the dungeon. The man asked if John would allow him to test his abilities. The guy thought, realizing that in front of him was one of the strongest adventurers he had ever met. After that, John asked where they wanted to test it. At that moment, Kitty came out and asked if everything was okay, to which the guy replied that she shouldn't worry. Then he said with a smile that he would be back for lunch. As they stood facing each other, John was surprised that the man was going to fight with his bare hands. He told John not to relax. John replied that if the man was unarmed, then so would he. The man warned that he would not be easy to deal with, as he was one of the strongest super high-ranking adventurers. Having prepared for the fight, John said that he would not relax. Seeing the guy's mood, the man noted his kind heart. After John was able to repel the first attack, the man was surprised that he did not have a weapon on him. After this, John asked if the man now recognized him. He replied that he became even more curious. Then John said that he was not going to stay there. He added that apparently the man still doesn't take him seriously. The man explained that this was necessary to test his abilities. Hearing this, John said that it was almost dinner time and he didn't want to be late. Then the man noted that he had not seen John in such an elevated mood for a long time. After that, he decided to show him one of his techniques. The man added that no one had ever managed to defeat him on the first try. Then John thought that he could not escape the gaze of the wise demon. The third level of release allowed him to use his abilities to the maximum and process visual information. At that moment, the man started shouting, asking if John could see his super speed. The guy just started to reason that if you strike at such speed, you can always find a way to retreat. After these words, John calmly fought off another attack from the man. The adventurer said he didn't expect the guy to be left without a single scratch. Then John explained that it was enough for him to see and predict all the actions. The man couldn't believe why John was even in such a high rank. He also realized that the guy's friend was absolutely right. People like John deserve to be at a super high rank. At this point, the guy asked what dungeon they were talking about. The man began to tell that in a week, a super high-class dungeon would appear in the Sea of Trees. High-class adventurers are called upon to defeat him, and they asked John to join them. Without further ado, the boy agreed, which made the man happy. Then he began to apologize for today's surprise, and said that he would contact John. After some time, John returned home and told his sister about this. Kitty, worried, asked if her brother was hurt and if he was all right. John apologized for making her worry and said that everything was fine. Then the sphere appeared and began to ask what the man had said about the dungeon, asking for details. John said that in a week they should go to a super high-rank dungeon. At this time, the adventurer thought that if this continued, they would not be able to win. She walked into the man's office and opened the door wide. This man turned out to be her father, whom she asked to tell her about the skills. The man responded menacingly that he had advised his daughter to give up her adventures because they were dangerous. Restka continued to beg her father to tell her about something important. The man turned around and couldn't understand where the girl got her stubbornness from. The girl began to say that her father devoted himself to research for her sake. Then the man simply pointed to the table where she could see the information she needed. He explained that it contained research that she wanted to know. The wildly happy adventurer thanked her father and said she would take a look. At this time, the adventurer with a bad reputation was still sitting in his favorite establishment. Hearing the noise, he turned around and asked who had decided to stop him from drinking. The demon in human form began to ask if he was a super high-class adventurer. The guy replied that he was in a bad mood and would not answer questions. With a menacing look, he said that if they came for business, then let them leave. Then the demon, with madness in his eyes, declared that he had come to kill the adventurer. Hearing this, the boy stood up and asked if the demon thought he would let it go. The demon replied that in battle he would immediately see which of them was weak. At this point, the guy got angry and started shouting that he would finish him off in 3 seconds. Dodging the quick attacks, the demon only increased the guy's anger. After that, he made a clear attack, saying that even among super high-ranking fighters, there was a difference in strength. Pouring wine over himself, the guy began to ask what other difference they were talking about. He then shouted that he had not yet shown his true strength. At that moment, the demon said that he hit the guy with all his strength, and he turned out to be stronger than he thought. The adventurer said that as soon as he killed the demon, he would look for information, because he wanted to know his name. Then the demon said that he could call him Hermes. The adventurer just laughed and said that he would definitely find out who he really was later. After a few minutes of fighting, the demon realized that the enemy was sucking magic out of his opponent. The adventurer said that he would beat the demon long and hard and would not let him leave. The demon just chuckled, saying he wasn't sure about that, and the fight continued. He felt that the skills of an adventurer were not suitable for the super high class. Then the guy began to concentrate his strength in his hands and declared that the demon was very wrong. The demon, seeing this, shouted that this world is not ruled by technology. He knew that if they combined their skills, they could create something more powerful than a demon's body. After defeating the adventurer, he said that since he was really super high-ranked, we should use his power. Taking away some skills, the demon laughed, feeling the potential of these skills. Suddenly, the guy's phone rang, and the demon noticed it. After reading the message, he realized that the 4 super tall adventurers were leaving the city, and the forces would be dispersed. With a crazy smile, the demon said that this was great news. A week later, John was walking down the street when he came across another adventurer. The guy carefully asked what he wanted. The man replied that John had already become popular among adventurers, and everyone was waiting for him. This did not surprise John at all, and he accepted this information calmly. Suddenly, an adventuress appeared behind him and asked how long he had been waiting. John replied that he had heard about the difficulties of this dungeon, and so decided to help. The girl smiled and said that she was very glad that he was nearby. Then, with a smile on his face, John said that he would do everything in his power. The man was surprised that the girl could do more than just frown. After some time, John's friend said that they needed to board the helicopter when everyone was ready. At this time, the demon fed the dog and said that the long-awaited day had come. 4 super tall adventurers are attacking the dungeon, and 2 are outside. The demon understood that now only that same guy could stop him. However, he decided that he would be in perfect shape for the rematch. Having prepared for battle, the demon said that it was time to begin. He approached 2 guards who informed him that entering this dungeon alone required a high rank. When they asked to show the guild card, the demon immediately hit one of the girls. He asked if it was true that if he was not going to enter, he should not show anything. When the guard confirmed this, the demon kicked him and said that he had the right answer. He didn't think he could cause a stir on his own. That's why I decided it was time to create real chaos on the streets. Having activated the portal, the demon called upon his brothers to come out and help him. He told them that he had an important task and asked them to begin the real destruction. The demon was eager to see what would happen. Cries of demons appearing echoed throughout the streets, and evacuations began. At this time, Catherine, Kitty, and Jessica were glad that they had managed to finish their business in the middle-rank dungeon. Suddenly, they saw a demon and asked if he was an adventurer from the guild. As soon as he noticed Kitty, he froze in place, unable to move. Coming to his senses, he asked her if she had an older brother. The girl answered in the affirmative, and then the demon smiled sweetly. Then he decided to find out her brother's name, which confused the girl. A moment from the previous fight came back to him. And then the realization came that the demon had finally found John. At that moment, one of the guys approached the girls and said that they shouldn't have named the name, because the demon was acting suspiciously. As the demon reached for the girls, Kitty covered Catherine with her hand. She didn't understand what was happening and why there was such tension between them. At this point, the demon explained that he was looking for her brother and asked for forgiveness for the fact that she would have to go with him. The girls were confused and did not understand what was being discussed. Hearing this, the demon realized that he had no other choice. With a wild look, he declared that he would deal with them all. He assured them that it would all be over soon, but the girls continued to stand there in bewilderment. Kitty began to realize that this demon was quite strong and looked more terrifying than her brother. She realized that even if the three of them fought, they would not be able to win. Kitty realized that the demon was hunting her, which meant that he would first eliminate her friends. At that very second, she pounced on the guy with a sword in her hands. She shouted at the girls to come quickly for help. While the girls stood there in confusion, Kitty continued to shout that she would stop him. They started running away and asking Kitty for forgiveness for leaving her. The demon thought that if he let the girls go, there would be a greater chance that John would show up. Releasing the sword of one of the girls, he turned to her and asked how long she thought she could fight him. At that moment, Kitty shouted that she would not fight because the guy would not be able to win anyway. This greatly confused the demon, and he did not understand what the girl meant. Kitty explained that since the demon's real target was not her, he would not be able to harm her until he achieved his goal. Then the demon said that the girls would have to do what he said. Kitty shouted again that she completely agreed. The demon could not understand what was happening to her and what she was planning. He was confused by the fact that she agreed so quickly, and he wondered if it was because she trusted her brother. After these thoughts, the demon told the girls to follow him. At this time, a man from the helicopter said that there was a huge accumulation of magical energy. Another man argued that they needed to attack the dungeon as soon as possible. Suddenly, one of the adventurers shouted sharply that they needed to wait. He started shouting that there was a massive crush in the city, and the chaos was only getting worse. Hearing this, John began to worry about his sister. The adventurer said they needed to turn around to prevent further destruction. Then one of the men said that it was important to prevent chaos, but they had more important things to do. As soon as he voiced that it was a bad idea, everyone looked at him askance. The man began to explain that the dungeon was very unusual and that the magical power increased exponentially. He wanted to convey to them that if they turned back now to calm the city, other problems would arise here. In other words, the man said that they should have split up. They began to distribute 2 detachments, one of which would go to the city. One of the adventurers said that he was not at all against this idea. John, however, thought that his sister's safety should be his priority, and therefore he needed to go back. Then one of the men said that they needed to split into groups of 3 to better concentrate their forces on the squad attacking the dungeon. They decided that John would go back to the city with the adventuress. However, one of them was against it and wanted one of the guys to be swapped for John. He explained this by saying that every group needs a leader, and John's friend is needed for the response team. At this point, John shouted that he wanted to be on the response team and could not go into the dungeon. Then the man said that his offer was rejected because he had no right to do so. Hearing this, John said that he would then act himself. The adventurer began to say that he needed his help and asked him to stay. At that moment, the girl asked if the guy was worried about his sister. When John answered positively, the girl immediately said that she would protect her. John believed the girl, and she responded by saying that she would definitely take care of her. After that, saying that she was faster than a helicopter, she returned towards the city. After this, the man began to tell them to clear the dungeon and return to the city as soon as possible. John looked at the man with a little aggression but agreed with him. At that moment, the man thought that he wanted to see what the guy was capable of.